Okay, well, first of all, I'd like to say, and I is gonna find me, because I want to be a part of this fucking dumb wannabe tennis tour.
You know, I think they got his testicles so far up their mouths that this is bullshit, you know?
I'm not thinking about that right now. I'm just thinking about having won the world title and hopefully trying to win another one someday. You just drop in and just smack the quarterback, drop down, snap, Well, I'll tell you, Stu, I did battle some humongous waves.
Oh, just the paper thing?
Oh, surf looks good on it. Not bad.
Ain't that swell with Jed and Vaughn.
Oh, those guys are back!
Get a haircut.
Good to have you, Dion.
Thank you.
It's been a while, mate.
Good to be here.
Yeah, so caught up at the trade show up there at Ridges in Coolangatta, where you are a newly minted representative for Former.
Absolutely minted to the bone. Yeah, huge contracts, cars, private jet, all of the goods that come with a lucrative sponsorship deal. But no, it's been pretty epic. I was like, actually, without getting too deep too quick, but I did have a bit of a rough year last year on like a couple of fronts. But one of the really interesting things that happened when I stopped riding for Globe was that as a professional athlete, you've probably talked to a bunch of people about this before, and I've heard it spoken about in like various sports. Losing a sponsor like that, the kind of loss of self-worth and purpose and stuff was really funny to, not funny, but interesting to try and navigate.
Not funny, yeah.
Not ha-ha funny at all. Like definitely some internal conversations going on that were pretty interesting. Hadn't really heard because I'd been lucky enough to have like a clothing sponsor since I was a kid.
Yeah.
So in whatever it is, that kind of like mentality around like your clothing sponsor is kind of your biggest main sponsor, and that's usually who you're working on projects for and stuff. So when you lose that, and I'm so goal driven as far as like there's always a project in the works, you're like always filming for a movie or something, and so when you don't have that, it was just a really weird time, you know. And you're obviously like, okay, well, I'm kind of old, and do I go get a job now? Like all that, those conversations, which is fine. Like I'm totally ready to step into that realm. But when you do feel like you've still got a little bit of juice in the tank, it's kind of it's an interesting one. I'm sure with time you would get over it. But then luckily enough for me, the Former guys came along, and I'd been helping them with a lot of photography stuff and shooting the team and like helping with trips and stuff. And so it just kind of snowballed into more of a thing. And then, yeah, actually just today was kind of the official launch. Once I launched my Sponsor Me tape that I'd sent to Dane, today was kind of like, would be what I would consider the kind of starting of riding for Former.
Sick. Fuck, yeah. That's exciting, man. It's interesting too because your career, I feel like it's, you know, it kind of peaked with Dark Hollow, which is your latest film as far as I can remember. I was just watching that in preparation for this, and I remember seeing the premiere down there in Newcastle at the fucked up old auditorium. It was such a sick night with the craziest sound system, just getting blasted with the most skits, Berghain techno, and it's actually such an interesting film because you adopt the kind of formula of the modern freesurfer or the modern aerialist, which is fucking go large in the air, but go large on the slabs too, which, you know, looking back through your career, you haven't really done that so much, I don't think, and you fucking get real sendy in that film, and it's an amazing film, man.
Thank you.
The combination, like I feel like your career is kind of, the hallmarks of it is that, you know, you bring in so many different influences from some of the major cities you've lived in, the eclectic tastes you have with art and music and literature and fashion, and it really all finds its mark in that film, where you have like just amazing music, like obviously the signature big aerials, but some fucked up slabs, some crazy slow-mo shit, that tripped out like sequence of the silver car driving around it's like, it reminds me of like a David Lynch, like real acidy kind of film. But that comes so late in your career. So, of course, you're going to think and feel that you got more juice left in the tank, because you do. Like, you're doing some of your best surfing now-ish.
I I mean, I definitely felt like that and do feel like that, but it's that weird, once again, kind of internal thing where you're like, am I kidding myself? Like, I feel this way, but like from an outside perspective, is that actually not the case? And you kind of are always second guessing. But for that film,
am I going to be the Hans Molman of professional surfing, kicking around in
I mean, that's
skate shoes and
the thing you don't want to do, or I personally don't want to do is
no one wants to be the Hans Molman dude.
I'm like, feel like I've rinsed it for a long time, and I feel very lucky to have been able to do that. But I don't want to get in a position where I'm like, 50 years old and still trying to like do punts and just like.
Well, I don't know.
I mean, I personally, I do want to still do that, but I don't want it to just be like, I don't know, people to feel like this guy needs to wrap it up. Like, you've had a good run, mate. But with that film, I didn't feel like that, and so I was like really put a lot of time and effort and energy into that because I felt like I still had a lot of good surfing to do. I'd been working on that footage for like the last like 2 or 3 years before it came out. And also the bigger wave stuff was stuff I'd never really had in clips.
Mate, you thrived in that environment.
I mean, it terrifies me like so much. Like,
mate, I'm not surprised. We're talking like 8 foot, A-framing, ledging, like not a drop out of place, but also no obvious entry point. Like new school surfing, that's a line that's developed in the course of your career. Like if you go back to the early days of your career, only the fucking Andy Irons of this world were even trying to surf waves like that, really.
Yeah.
Slater, etc., Hobgoods. But
I know what you mean. That kind of style of surfing those, which I haven't.
They were considered bodyboarding waves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's kind of probably come along since that kind of like Russ Bjerk, Noz, and there's a bunch of other guys as well from around the world doing that have kind of perfected that. So taking on trips with like Dav Fox, who shoots, came from bodyboarding, shot all the most iconic stuff over the last kind of 10 years. Him and Ty Glander, those guys take you on trips and all of a sudden you're surfing these waves that are conies in South Oz. Like, that's never on my radar to go surf, but I'm there with Dane and Craig and it's 8 foot and like Dav's shooting and you want to get like something different for your film and push yourself. So for me, I always wonder if big wave guys and slab guys feel as scared as I do when I'm out there, because I'm like so fucking scared, like terrified. And like there's stuff of shippies in there, and that to me was always like, coming from Tasmania and a lot of my friends I grew up with, they went on to surf that, and a lot of them were guys you would never have even heard of that are like gnarly out there. And then obviously you're like Benny Richardsons and the Tyler Holmer Crosses and Marty Paradises. So they are always so supportive and are like, they were so supportive, like, you got to come get shippies, like, come on, we'll look after you, we'll take you out there. And I went 3 times before and I got smoked the first 2 times, like absolutely thought I was going to die. Went one day and just should not have gone out. Someone whipped me onto one that just like went inside out, gurgled. I just like went over the falls and skimmed the bottom, was underwater for God knows how long, thought I was going to drown. Like terrifying. But when you're sitting out the back on the rope, like out the back of shippies in the deep water, looking in at the cliffs, so you're watching like 50-meter fucking sprays of water smacking against the cliff and like waves just like unloading, and you're seeing these giant spits just like that look like explosions, and you're just out the back in this deep cold water, and like these lumps start coming in, and you don't know how big it is when you're out the back there because it's just kind of this lump. So when you start going, it looks like a 4 foot high, but like obviously however wide piece of water, and it's not until it like gets onto that shelf that all of a sudden it like basically stops and starts going up. And then backside too, because you kind of, you're already whipping in a kind of awkward position, and then trying to navigate the step and where to be, especially if you're someone like me that hasn't surfed it a lot, so like don't have the knowledge of where to go that those guys are so gnarly at. They pick their lines and your backside, so when you hit the step, you actually have to hit it straight. You can't launch and land on your toes and like come straight up under it. You've kind of got to hit it at a 90-degree angle and land straight, and then set your line and come up, which is terrifying because you're also not looking, like you don't know what's happening there. So you're kind of looking at the cliff, looking at the step, trying to navigate that. And once that's sorted and you hopefully have made it, then you're turning and like you don't even know what's there at that point, and you hopefully haven't like fucked around too much at the bottom that like the lip is now coming at your head or whatever. And like the one that I finally got, which was like the last wave in the film, which by any means is not like the craziest wave out shippies or even close to like the ones that guys get, but for me personally, that was like one of the pinnacles of the film, and kind of like, it was the thing I was the most scared to do, and I put the most pressure on myself. I was like, I want to get away about shippies for this movie. Like, I want to prove to myself that I can do that. I'd been flogged out there a few times. And then luckily Riley was with me, and he was in the boat shooting 16 mil. And I actually came off the step, kind of lost it, went into a layback, but that kind of like stalled me a bit, which then like kind of put me half in the tube. And then I got out and was just like, okay, sweet, I'm fucking done here. Like, thank you, Lord. Like, fuck. So that for me was like a pinnacle thing. And it was, like you said, it would probably in any other edit, it would go by, you wouldn't pay attention to it, as far as like if it was in a shippies from that day, there would have been crazy shit. But for me, it was such a huge, important like milestone for me to like get over that, because those sessions just like, I'm so fucking scared, but when you like get into it and you do it, it's so rewarding to like push yourself past that level.
And a lot of the paddle stuff's super impressive. Like, did you learn a lot about your own abilities by, you know, putting yourself in these lineups and successfully paddling serious waves of consequence?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of like two sessions. There's kind of one at a wave on the south coast that we actually went to go surf a big outer reef bommy that like I have no business being out anyways, and we luckily got there and like it wasn't breaking. It doesn't happen very often. It's a huge east swell. It's out to sea, bomby. Craig had told me a story about him nearly drowning out. There was a close he'd come to drowning. He had been sitting in the lineup. They were kind of like, people were taking turns whipping, like Whippy and a bunch of like gnarly dudes were out there. And I guess one came and Craig kind of thought like, oh, maybe I'll have a go at paddling this. And like, you can't really paddle into that wave, like I don't think, from the stuff I've seen. But Craig will give it a go. And he paddled, and sure enough, the bottom drops and he kind of didn't go. Turned around, and there was just a monster behind it. So he's scratching, gets through it, duck dives, said he just got up, and the thing just grabbed him and just drug him back over the falls. And like, that's such a bad position, because the lip is going before you. It's like splitting the water. And if you're surfing a deep wave, it's essentially like a mushroom rock that it heaves and goes inside out, and then it just goes into deep water. So he just went down with the lip. It parted the fucking sea and just sent him like, he reckons the deepest he's ever gone. And he got to a point, he's like paddling, swimming, trying to get up, trying to stay calm, swimming. And he's like, this is insane. I'm still not close. And like, I'm done. And he finally like his body went into that natural reflex of breathing. So he just breathed in all this water, like still like a meter or two from the surface, and came up and was just like about to pass out, had swallowed all this water, got put on the ski, was throwing up. So he had told me that story, and then I'm going out to surf this wave. And like I said, it was like, we saw Whippy once again in the car park that morning, and I'm just like, this is almost embarrassing. They would be like, what are you doing? I'm with Tig, and I was with Sharma. Sure enough, we get out there, it's not big enough. I'm like, thank God. Because the other thing is like, the night before those sessions is almost worse than the surf. You're like at home, like I was at fucking Port Arthur in the little hotel, standing on the bed in my straps on the board, like trying to like picture what it's going to be like, making sure they're in the right spot, but like you're nervous. And so the night before that, I'd been freaking out, and so we get out there, it wasn't breaking. I'm like, oh, thank God, huge relief. But then we went to this other spot, no one was out, and it was like perfect 6 to 10 foot kind of range, like, and we were just paddling, and it was just Sharma and I, and it was a bluebird day, like perfect, 8 to 10 foot East Coast swell. So everywhere was probably cooking, and it was kind of a spot that you just normally wouldn't go on that, but we just happened to check it. And it was just these big green emerald, like offshore teepees, but like it's powerful and it's
First
kind of
reef
wedgy.
pipeline-esque.
Feels like that to me. I'm like, that was my version of kind of like what it would feel like to get a big wave out pipe or whatever. It's probably not as gnarly as that, but it was
knifing
scary.
it, backdooring it. You either get the line right or you're jumping out of the lip or you're too deep and getting fucking pulverized.
It's really wedgy wave that you have to take off behind it. So, like, you know, bigger waves, you can, if it was something that's kind of a longer running one, you can be, you know, start out and work your way in, you know, and kind of as you get more comfortable. Whereas with that, it's like, nah, where you want to normally take off, you'll get completely flexed. So you're getting over that, like, mental barrier of being like, I've got to be way over there, which you're just looking at this lump, like, I don't want to be there. I want to be over there, but once you take off and go, it's like it happens so quick because it's so wedgy. But that was another session that was like, that was one that was really special because it was just Sharma and I out trading these like 6-8 foot perfect kind of peaks. Sharma kept breaking boards, losing boards half the time. I'm like out there by myself and just like, yeah, once again, terrified, but just trying to like get over that. And that was a really special session that's in there too. And you see it's just these big green TPs. Like I think one of them kind of ends at one of the first parts and it just kind of spits. And so that was really special.
You actually get a crazy one out there too, that you're feeling it when you get blown out of that thing.
Yeah, because that was kind of like, I'd had a few that I got smoked and like a couple that I could have been deep, all that. And then that one I was finally like, oh, that felt good. And when I took off, I thought I was too deep and it let me through. So I was...
It must have been so square inside of that thing. From the position you took off in, like, yeah, you couldn't have been a millimetre deeper. You were right in the squared out moors of that thing.
Yeah, and just being in a nice big green tube like that, like it's something very special about that. And it does make me want to do that more, but I just somehow find myself end up chasing fucking airs most of the time. But yeah, and then there's some stuff from South Australia, which was a really scary session with Dane and Craig. It's the same time Craig got that really crazy one that was in like an old former clip.
The backside one at it's not Coney's, but another nearby kind of wave, huh?
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I mean, that wave's got definitely a more defined entry to it there, but that wave's fucking psycho. That's the biggest wave, or the biggest tube I've seen at that spot. It's a remarkable wave. Yeah, it's a closer in Slow Dance or one of those old Ando films, isn't it?
I think from memory it was the last former Craig film that they did. He did a piece, I think, I'm going to forget the name here, but it was the last like big one he had done for them, and I believe it was his last wave in that. I think I should probably know that, but
I love that wave.
Really
I love that wave because he kind of gets the little chip, and then he's such an elite surfer that he can get the chip and keep his composure, as like the shoulder of that thing as he was chipping into that would have looked fucking plutonium grade. The thickness of the tube that he must have known he was about to pack would have been rattling and rattled many of the world's best. But man, Ando, fucking so underrated in the juice. He's a psychopath. Like some of those, some of the features he's put out, like that fucking, a couple of those opening waves at Supers, the left there. Where he's
which
like,
is insane.
It's like on fucking rocks.
Yeah.
And the cunt's just like knifing it, face planting at the bottom with nothing but that magical perm to protect his precious little brain from splattering on the rocks.
Yeah.
On what is a blatant toe day, but I guess the theory is you got to paddle one before you tow one. Maybe I don't know why he tried to paddle on that day, but if he is a devotee to that theory, more respect to him.
He's for sure. I mean, to be honest, I don't think you'll see him towing again. But in situations like that kind of wave, like if you want to get a wave out there, there's people like bodyboarders paddling. There's gnarly dudes out there because they kind of scoop under it. Now Noah has figured all that out, so he's doing it. Russ is doing it. I'm sure there's a couple of other like underground lads from there that can do it. They can handle that. And then kind of Craig. Benny Howard got a nuts one, but it's like, it is such a gnarly wave to paddle. And it's only like, it's one of those spots where 1 in 10 or whatever might be paddleable, and the rest there's no chance. So you're gonna not only like pick, wait, and pick the one that's gonna let you in, but then you've got to like make it. So yeah, he's had crazy. I mean, when you look at what Craig's had over the time, if you were to pull out all those like big crazy waves and put them on a timeline, it would be fucking psycho. There's one from another spot down south that's kind of like a well-known big left slab that's out to sea, and that's even more terrifying because it's moving around. It's like 2 football fields worth of like area out there where they're kind of big monsters just coming in. And then the one he got, it was in like, I think the last Apocky Craig film that was done called Ceremony, and I think it's his last wave in that, or it's one of the main ones in there where he just takes off on kind of what looks like an 8-foot wave, and next minute it just turns into this like gigantic 10-foot left pit, and he's just kind of styling in. And he waited apparently for 3 hours or something for that, and just sat there and was just waiting. And meanwhile, people are paddling around, getting waves, getting smoked, whatever. And I don't even know if he'd caught a wave. And then that one came in, and someone was right next to him, a bodyboarder. I can't fucking remember who it was, that was like, "Are you going? Are you going?" Kind of assuming he wasn't going to go, and almost like staunched him out of it, because apparently it just had a real long wall, and they come in and just look like they're going to close the whole thing out. But those are like the kind of nuts ones. And Greg just like, yep, swung around, so I think he was on his 5'9" or something, like,
Yeah,
maybe 5'11", but it wasn't. It was like an under 6 foot board, and people surf that on like 8, 9s, and where you see people riding like huge fucking boards, look like they're for Waimea, but they're like knifing these vert drops. And he just waited and picked that one. And I think the Kandui's swell was the same. Like, he's just sits out there and waits. Half the time you're like, Craig, you gotta catch a fucking wave, man. And like, I know the people that are filming him or whatever are just like, batteries are dying and they're fucking kicking rocks and like looking around, just like, is Craig still out there? And the next minute he's just knifing a fucking 10-foot pit.
Wow.
So yeah, he's got that shit wired.
It's super cool, man. Like, I feel like he's kind of led that charge for the free surfers and the aerialists into that really heavy water space. And it all makes sense, like if you go back to the original aerial pioneers, like the Santa Cruz crew, they were all fucking absolute psychopaths in the juice too.
Yeah.
So big punts and big pits, it's a winning formula.
Yeah.
And it proves, for any critics out there who might be claiming that, you're soft or you haven't earned your keep, like by doing that, you're really earning your keep and shutting the mouths of whatever critics are out there just by taking off on waves that those people don't want to. That gets you instant respect and longevity in the industry, I reckon.
Yeah, it's such a big part of surfing, I guess, is like when you look back at, why Hawaii has always been such an integral part of surfing, and Waimea, when the Greg Knowles and the whatever, even outside of the kind of like machismo around surfing big waves and fucking beating your chest or whatever, but like it's like a waterman thing, or like it's kind of the last frontier if you are able to surf other waves and do airs and do turns and are competent and all that stuff. It's like if you can also reach that goal, then it just rounds out the whole kind of thing. And it is kind of such a mental game, and yeah, you really have to push yourself to do that. So it's like a self-growth thing as well. I think more so than that like really fucking ego big wave thing. It's like, I think the guys that are doing it constantly and are pushing the boundaries, guys and girls, it's like, it's a mental game that you're playing with yourself, and it's like a journey of like self kind of like progression to do that,
Mate, it's a really interesting psychological space to enter. And I think if you look at almost any sport, any high profile sport, there is this, I think on a public's kind of perception of things, there's a real intrigue in sports where there's the potential risk of serious injury, and people are navigating that with a mixture of skill and courage. Like that to me is what really defines a lot of the sports I love. Football, boxing, mixed martial arts. I mean, freaking gymnastics. Like any sport you want to name, really. That there's generally the potential for serious injury in the mix somewhere. And even cricket, fucking hell, there's a 150-kilometre red rock coming at your head. Like, so like it's watching how people survive and navigate those situations. And like you said, like the psychology of that's fascinating because, like Mike Tyson says about boxing, like boxing's not a sport for tough guys. If you want to be a tough guy in boxing, you stand up talking funny at the end of your career because you've had the shit beaten out of your brain. Yeah. So it's like there's just and surfing's the same. Like there's a fine line between bravery and stupidity. And if you just want to send it for sending its sake to appease sponsors or as some kind of marketing strategy, you're going to pay a very dear price. You may pay with your life, but you may also just pay with being injured for life.
Yeah.
So like, you got to want it. You got to dedicate yourself to it. And you got to make sure that your motives and intentions are pure.
Yeah, like you said, that there's a fine line between going out and doing something stupid and making a wrong move at the wrong time, just purely based off of not giving that situation enough thought or respect, and then you could find yourself in a really bad spot. But yeah, the stuff that the guys do now, guys and girls, like I was in Hawaii with Emily Erickson the other day, and we went and surfed Sunset one day. It was like the first day I got there.
Yeah, she's one of the standouts from the Eddie, right? Got one of the first waves in it on a single fin, right?
Yeah. She was just riding a single fin, I think, the whole time. That's what she was riding the day we went to Sunset. I hung out with her and a partner, Mike Pringle, and it was like first day in Hawaii. Hadn't been back there in years. It was big, beautiful swell. Sun was out. And they're like, let's go surf Sunset. And I was like, yeah, I haven't surfed there since I was a kid. And it's, for me, a little bit more manageable than paddling out pipe with a bunch of people. And so they lent me like this big, beautiful, like 8-foot board, and then paddled out with them, and I'm still like, whoa, shit, all right, it's fucking solid 8 foot. There's a couple of like 10-footers coming through. You're kind of dodging around, and Emily just paddled straight out, like straight to the inside. Bomb set came and just swung and just bang straight, like 5 minutes after we got out there. I'm like, whoa, that was so sick. Like, and then I was just kind of hunting around, but we had a really fun sesh. But yeah, there's those kind of people now that are dedicating their time and their lives to surfing those big waves. It's just incredible to see what they do and how they mentally push through whatever they're pushing through. Everyone's probably different, but for me, I look at how scary that is. I'm like, you're fucking insane to be able to have that mentality that you want that. Like, and they want it so bad too. It's not like they're sitting out there shaking like, I can do it, I'm going to get one. They're like, I want it. And that's hectic.
That is so hectic. And yeah, it can only be the result of training and dedication and, a love of the strategic element of heavy water surfing. Like, there's so much strategizing and watching the ocean and understanding rhythms and periods and swell directions. There's just like so much data and lead up that goes into all that, and people live for that shit, and I can see why. I mean, I've experienced it on a much smaller level, but it is a rad art form, and fuck, it's cool, man, when you see it tested at places like Jaws, Sunset, Waimea, and to see that kind of side of surfing, it like sometimes it doesn't always translate to like a good broadcast spectacle. I found the Big Wave World Tour and stuff like that, it's just like the periods are long, it can be pretty slow at times, but when you're out there sitting in that ocean, it's an amazing pursuit. It's like the absolute purity of surfing in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's hats off to fucking anyone that chases that. It's terrifying.
Mate, so what's it like being a part of Team Former?
I mean, it's been such a awesome, very natural feeling progression for me, I guess, with like Austin and Craig, and I've spent a lot of time with Dane over the years, but obviously I'm like much closer to kind of Craig and Dane. And then in the initial stages when they were launching, Dylan was a part of it. Dylan Rito was another skater and best friend at Austin, and I was living with Dylan in the States for like the last year or so of his life, and when they were kind of getting Former going and everything. So for me, it also has like a really beautiful connection to him as well, and his kind of legacy as well. So it's been honestly super natural, and like we did talk to a couple of other brands and stuff, and nothing really felt like it would have been as natural as what that was. But it's been amazing, and those guys are growing, and they're growing at like a pretty fast rate. So of course, like those early years, it's just like head down and go for it. And so at the moment they're working on a film, which I think is going to be so big for them, because Someone said this the other day, and it wasn't in regards to them. It was actually just to like big brands in general, another brand. And they were like, sometimes you'll find these companies have these like Ferraris sitting in the garage, but like they don't drive them. They're not like getting them out on the road and putting them to use. And like, all I want to see is Dane and Craig surf, you know. But like when you're starting out a brand and there's so much going on, sometimes that stuff is expensive, as we know, like doing trips, putting a film together. And so it's like to finally be in a position, I think, where they're like putting their heads down, working on a film. It's like people are going to be so excited to see that because the team is absolutely insane and you just want to see those guys surfing and want to see them on trips. And unfortunately, like Craig is one of the people you see the least surfing. You know, when you do, it'll blow your head off and you only need to get it once every year or two. And it's like, yeah, Craig's my favorite surfer. So I'm super excited for that too. We're working on this film. I think it's going to come out in June or July.
Wow.
Craig's been sitting on a lot of stuff for that. We'll probably go hard for the next 6 months. So going back to what I was saying earlier, just like having those projects and like goals, and then obviously working with a team of people that you're super excited to work on. And straight away they let me design like a range that was like really fun because I used to do that quite a bit with Globe. Not that I'm a fashion designer by any means, but to be able to have a bit of control over the stuff that you want to wear and you hope that your friends would want to wear and maybe Groms would want to wear. It's fun. I always like have a good time trying to figure out like, you know, what would my mates want to wear or like what some frothing Grom from Coffs Harbour want to wear or whatever. So that for them to let me have that freedom was really cool. So all in all, it's been, insane and it felt really natural. And then, like I said, today kind of feels like the first day of like being on Former, even though I've kind of been running stickers and stuff for a bit, but it was kind of, we wanted to hold off the, I guess, official launch until this Sponsor Me tape thing came out. So yeah, I'm so grateful to be on that just because it helps me also mentally feel like you have another purpose.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know, talk to us about that journey. Like there is, you know, a lot of iconic literature dedicated to that. I think it's Solzhenitsyn, is it? Man's Search for Meaning. Like, you know, this is like, you know, I was listening to I think it might have been Yuval Noah Harari or one of these kind of classic philosophers talking the other day about the fact that humans, we never had to search for meaning because the meaning was survival for most of our history. It's only in the last like few hundred years where we've had to contemplate meaning because we're not so busy just trying to survive. And interestingly enough, you know, where I find a lot of meaning is in simulating survival, growing food, hunting food, fighting cunts in a fucking jiu-jitsu gym, like so like you know, going back to my kind of evolutionary design is my way of finding meaning and purpose, and it doesn't hinge so much on what I do for a living and the way I make money or the content I produce. I've kind of harked back to kind of more evolutionary designs or needs, but you know, what was why did you find it difficult, I guess, to transition? I mean, this is there's an obvious answer to this question. When you've done something for so long, like fuck, of course your identity and the story you tell yourself is going to be wrapped up in that. And I have interviewed people, you know, Nathan Hedge, Luke Munro. Like I've written stories about this transitional period and the depression that often befalls surfers as they lose their sponsor and have to transition into the workforce, and lose the kind of, you know, there's like a pedestal there, I guess, is really the addiction. It's the addiction maybe to like being seen as special or something, and going back to the working class is like a fucking
but it's also something
hit to the ego, I guess.
Yeah, the ego hit and the fact that you've done it for so long, like that's your specialty. If you're a plumber for a long time, for 20 years, that's your specialty. And then imagine being told like, oh, you can't do that anymore. Like you're going to have to go and get another job. It's not even like about going and getting a real job or whatever. It's like you just lose what you've dedicated your whole life to. It's become your specialty. You've become really good at it. There's probably a bit of that like pedestal, maybe ego attached to it, but like if you put it in the context of any other job that's not a professional sport or whatever, it's like usually as you progress and get older and do something for a long time, you get better, more qualified, you become kind of an expert in your field or whatever. Whereas the problem with sports is as you're getting older and the body's degrading and, you know, the new young kids coming up and you're not like being able to do that as a job anymore or a livelihood, all that knowledge and thing that you've worked so hard to kind of specialize in is now taken from you, and so you start from scratch again. And like that, I think, is what's probably such a huge bummer. It's like, because, you know, we all live and breathe and love surfing. Imagine that, you know, you do that just for fun, and then imagine also that's your job and your livelihood. It's like, it's your whole life. Like everything is surfing. So when that all of a sudden you can't do that anymore, you can obviously still do it for fun, and that's amazing because you'd probably fucking be really fucked up if you lost that as well, which people probably do from injuries and stuff. But when you do lose it as your job, you're like, wow, that I just invested 20 years of my life into this thing, and like, what do I have to show for it now as far as like rolling it into the next kind of phase of my life or like my next way of making an income or whatever. So I always think that's a big one, but also probably going back to what you're talking about, the evolutionary thing, which was kind of left out, is the creative side. So the artistic side, which, you know, I believe is an evolutionary trait in all of us as well, as that creative
rock
output.
drawings have been around for 60,000 years plus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like that for me personally, when I deep dove into kind of the psyche of why is this making me feel so weird and depressed and down, and what am I losing here? And it wasn't monetary based. Like that is not it. Like it's the purpose for sure. Like you said, like Man's Search for Meaning, like amazing book, and talks about that, like having that purpose to kind of continue to want to live. I think it's Viktor
Frankl.
Viktor Frankl.
Yeah, I haven't read it. So.
Yeah, epic book. Like,
Of course you've read it. Dion's a fucking Illuminati of the literati right here.
No, to be honest, there's only probably a couple of books that I've read. And when you mentioned, I was like, yeah, fuck, I actually did read that one. But every other thing you mentioned, I probably won't. But the creative side of it is the thing that got me, was like, well, that all these projects. So I was lucky to get on to free surfing, and I was working with, you know, Joe and Kai and all these amazing creative people and all the photographers and all the writers, and it's always this creative output. So if you go on Early Days magazine trip and you're surfing and you're working with the photographer to get a photo, when that photo is published, it's not like, oh, look at me, I'm fucking sick. It's like, I know what went into being in that spot to do that air at that time, line up with that photographer when the light was good and blah, blah, blah. And there's the piece of art that we have to show for it. So every photo, every video, every time you get a clip, you're trying to like, I view it as like you're making kind of a piece of art, you know. That's all the things I've done. I'm not saying they're art pieces, but
no, they totally are. That's why I enjoy what you do.
I mean, for me, it's a creative outlet, and I know for myself personally, not just through this, but if I don't have a creative outlet, like I would go fucking insane. Like I have, whether it's at home, like painting, which I'm not a painter, but like just doing that. My mum's an amazing painter and I've grown up doing that. But like if I'm doing that, or if I'm like working on a brand coming up with like the creative direction, or if I'm concepting up a new film that we're working on, or a photo shoot in Dubai or the wave pool or whatever it is, they're always like creative projects, and you're working towards a goal of putting out something that you feel is like a little work of art that you've made. And so that was my whole career, is I've looked at these things as like, these were just creative outputs for me. And so that was probably one thing that was really scary, was like, man, do I not get to do that anymore with the thing that I love and know how to do the best, is surfing, and I enjoy it so much. So I think when I really got down to it, that's the part that really why I get excited and what drives me. And yeah, it's not so much the monetary side, it's that creative output. It's like, that's kind of why you would, you know, going back to the sponsor thing, because they are usually the ones that support those projects and stuff. So
yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, because creating art without an audience, I guess it's a much more meaningless pursuit. There's not the. It's a funny thing, isn't it? Like I can relate because you know, as a journalist or writer, like you know, when I was writing for newspapers and articles are going viral and you know, getting 250,000 unique hits or whatever, you feel like there's a fucking mad rush. Like Hunter S. Thompson says, like more of a high than any drug he's done is like when you're onto a scoop and you're writing it.
Yeah.
But that is all predicated on having someone who's going to read it. Whereas like just writing shit and pumping it into the fucking internet, like I don't necessarily get a whole lot of joy from that because there's nothing at stake. You know, it's like art for art's sake. Like there's an argument that that's epic, but for me, like it's not. Like I want fucking people to read that shit.
Yeah.
But
there's a therapeutic. There's also the, like I was saying with Tassie painting, whatever. Like that's the kind of therapeutic side of art that is a meditative, beautiful thing where it's like, but that's kind of the goal of that style of, you know, working on art like that. Whereas, if I'm going to work on a film for 2 years and put all this effort into it and then just like go and put it in my hard drive in Tassie and chuck it in the closet, like that's a little bit different because, you know, that's also something that I am really proud of and want to show people. I don't want to show them these paintings that I'm fucking dicking around with at home, but yeah, the art side of it for me, or the creative side of it, is that it's such a beautiful thing, and it goes hand in hand with surfing. Like that's why I love surf films so much, and the films that we would have grown up on. You know, when I feel like it was amazing time with those filmmakers you had back then. You know, specifically like going back to the early Rip Curl Search days and the Quicksilver stuff, and like I kind of reference them all the time, but like Feral Kingdom and Surfers of Fortune. You know, and you're talking about like Don King, Jeff Hornbaker, Sonny Miller, John Frank, like these guys that are these iconic filmmakers and artists, and Brian Bleak, who shot all the 16mm in Surfers of Fortune, and then also like the amazing kitchen scenes in the Bruce movie of like the board falling off the roof and the goldfish in the bowl, which is like, to me, I'm like, oh, I'll just watch that all day, and like it just brings this whole nother level. And so like, the old, you know, RT and the old Volcom films, those create, and you know, then there's obviously Jack McCoy and what he's done with his like collection of films, and then earlier filmmakers. So throughout that kind of narrative has been these amazing creative artists, you know, and all the photographers, and it goes on, and it just goes hand in hand with this beautiful act of surfing and the imagery you can capture doing that. Like it's such a amazing thing to do and capture and show. So it just, it works perfect. You know, you probably don't see like a 40-minute like music-driven tennis video very often, you know, where it's a bunch of slow-mo shots in the afternoon. You might, but like I haven't seen it, but you know, I watched that surfing all day long, and Joe G's stuff that he did, and like all his kind of the way that he put his spin on stuff is just, the list goes on and on and on and on, but it's like, it just goes hand in hand.
It does, man. It does. Like all those films you mentioned, what they really come down to is their ability to capture a culture, a time, and a place. The capturing of place is like critical to what really brought me into surf films. Like a lot of the Sonny Miller films, and you know, going further back, your Dick Cool, George Greeno, Albie Falzon films, like they were taking us to this exotic place that seemed like hard to believe, even like watching it now, because those places have now changed to the point where they're barely recognizable. It's like they're capturing just this like supremely cosmic, richly cultural places that as surfers we're so fortunate enough to be able to traverse these places, learn from them, and have them shape our aesthetic. But by shaping the aesthetic of these films, they also kind of take you back there and remind you of what's out there in the world to be experienced and to let it wash over you. And mate, surf films really kind of stand alone in that respect. I've not come across another culture that produces films like that. Skating does it, but it's in an urban environment, and it's just as rich in its own way, and just as character driven and place driven, but surfing is taking place in the fucking far distant reaches of humanity, and what exists on those far fringes is, whether it's Micronesia, Polynesia, Indonesia, Australia, Africa, surfing somehow just has a way of interacting with these cultures and capturing them that's super profound. It's shaped me more than any other thing in life.
Yeah. And those, I think specifically those kind of earlier films were that location-based stuff. And at the time, it was, like you said, fresh and new, and they hadn't been seen, and they wouldn't be recognizable today, but you were just getting transported to the far reaches of the globe or the jungles of Indonesia or whatever it is. And as a surfer, the cherry on top is that there's also a perfect wave, beyond that beautiful village with a culture you've never seen or heard of before, and in some faraway land. So it's got this mystical feel, and then you're going there to immerse in the ocean of that area. And I don't know, it's very spiritual traveling to these faraway surf spots. And those early films were really good at kind of portraying that, especially guys like Abi Fauzon and those early films, and obviously Morning of the Earth. And they have that kind of spiritual, very spiritual, psychedelic feel to them that, outside even of the actual physical location, they take you on this journey into God knows where, some other dimension that is just fuck, I want to go there.
God does know where. God knows exactly where. And those places and those experiences, which we've all had, they open you up, man. They open you up, and they kind of deprogram this capitalist, consumerist matrix propaganda that has you, locked and loaded for a career of debt and drudgery. And you go out and you see these other ways of life where people are existing on fucking peanuts, but they're so stoked, and they have these really intricate belief systems that are super intelligent, super complex, and then you're kind of coming back from these journeys completely changed, and then trying to reintegrate into this very staccato, unnatural system. And you're hold on, what the fuck is this? What is any of this based on? Where's the logic to the way we're living here in the West? And you realize there almost is none. And as surfers, that's really influenced us to, become real truth seekers, truth tellers, mad futurists. I love all the LSD infused iconography of the Dick Hools, the Jack McCoys, the kind of 70s, 80s surf films were just so futuristic in the board design, the places they're visiting, the concepts, the aesthetic, and your role in all this, you come much later in the timeline, but again, if I look at the signatures of your career, it is this dedication to forward thinking, futurism, and you've kind of you're traversing similar geographical terrain, but you're bringing in all these other influences from your time in New York City and Europe, and some of these kind of big urban centers, and the eclectic mix of friends you have. So we're getting imagery that reminds me of Morning of the Earth, except that you're doing big frontside grabs, and then you're just getting peppered by the fucking most sick high energy music. And you've created something that's a pastiche of old and new, and it fucking hits hard, man.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. I mean, I feel you're never going to move forward without looking at the past and understanding the past, and kind of, deep diving into that is what will essentially drive you forwards in a way that is going to be done, I think, in a lot more meaningful way than if you were just to come out and not have any idea of the past fucking 30 years worth of amazing history, rich history that's there, even just in surf films alone, and so that, I think, for me, and I hope it's for kids now, I don't really know. This is kind of a interesting conversation, is that feeling we used to get of going, before our time, it was going to the cinemas. Dad used to get old Jack's films sent down to Tassie on big 35 rolls, or like 16 they would have been, and take them to the cinema and bring all the like surfers together and show like the latest Jack McCoy, like fucking Tubular Swells, whatever was playing at that time. So there was that, you know, that was bringing people together doing that. And then that would have been such a beautiful experience. And we still get it now with Prems. And then we would go into the surf shop and buy the new VHS that you just heard had come out and go home and plug it in and sit there and then watch it 1,000 times over and just be transported. And so I wonder now, like, and that shaped all of us so heavily in like a lot of the ways we've just spoken about. And I wonder if there is something that's kind of, are we missing something now that we're not, younger kids, are they not getting that kind of something that we were getting, or are they getting it from different ways? I mean, it's obviously, you got a bunch of shit to choose from on the internet, but there was something about that, you know, without just sounding fucking old school and reminiscing about the VHS days, but yeah, to me, that was a beautiful time, having this physical object that now feels like a fucking artifact when you go back and dust it off at home and fucking wipe off the dust off the blue Feral Kingdom tape. And like, it was this beautiful kind of ritualistic thing. It just doesn't translate
prepare
to
the sacrament, you know, prepare the herbal sacrament in the bowl and put the artifact in the VHS. And yeah, after your morning surf, flare up for the afternoon surf. But
yeah,
mate, it's such a good point. What surf films lack now is permanence. Like, you watch them and then they're gone, and it fucking bums me out. Like, the reason surf films had such an impact on me as a grom is, yeah, like you said, you watched them on loop, man. You watched them over and over again, and each time you watched them, I don't know, it was weird. It kind of, I feel like I always got something new out of them. I still got a charge from them. I got to know them back to front. And now, like, they're gone, and it's kind of weird because, yeah, you lose connection to those sacred texts, those innovating texts.
Yeah.
You lose the ceremony. You lose all of that. And I don't know what the solution to that is. Maybe it's providing them to be downloaded for free, so at least you have a hard copy on your computer that you can constantly go to, and you don't get like writer's block every time you go to YouTube and try to think of a film to watch.
Yeah.
But that intimacy with surf films, I think it can only be developed over multiple reps with the same surf film.
Yeah, I think, like you said, that getting something new out of it every time, you can't just watch something once and expect, yeah, you'll get a pretty broad overview of the whole thing and like you've watched it for sure, but until you fucking are sitting in the car and you hear a song and you can exactly picture what turn is happening at the beat of that particular song or whatever, that's when you've entered that real ritualistic fucking ceremonial like addiction to that film or whatever, where like, yeah, I can put on whatever track from any of those old Gainey movies, Jack's movies, fucking Taylor's movies, and like to the fucking beat picture like what turn so-and-so was doing on what wave. And yeah, I don't get that anymore, and I don't know if kids are getting that. And so yeah, to your point of like, how do you bring that back? What is it? I do think the download thing is like, that is at least not physical, but it feels like you have it. It lives there on your computer and you can tap in whenever you want. You don't have to have internet. You don't have to go to get fed ads, fucking whatever. It's just like, I want to watch that. There it is. I'm going to watch that. Like, yeah, it's a funny one that I just, for me, it hits so hard because it was like my life growing up, and it's shaped my whole life. It still shapes my life. Like, I don't watch as many surf vids on repeat as I used to now, but I have a list of probably 100 of all those films that I've dug around the internet and collected and found, and it's kind of like my sacred list that I've got that I can go to and be like, I want to watch Sabotage. All right, boom, there it is. Or I want to tap back into fucking Shane Dorian's section in Hit and Run where he's surfing 1 foot Maldives doing 10 turns in a row, and I was a grom. I'm like, that's the funnest left I've ever seen, and it's that big, and Dorian's whacking it, and it's like, there's just these iconic moments that hit you as a kid that you like remember forever, you know, let alone the songs and the soundtracks and everything. So yeah, for me, in surfing and moving forwards, and kind of like what I've always tried to do and what I want to continue to try and do is like work on surf films and like making sure that those still exist in surfing. And you know, by everyone kind of doing that, and it's happening now in the like younger Australian free surf community, is like going on the road, doing premieres, bringing people together to like come and watch films and get excited and sit in a room and like hoot and holler, and then the film finishes and you talk about fucking how was that one Noah paddled out supers or whatever. You can get your surf geek on and like rock out about that. And I had a really interesting trip to Hawaii recently, the same one I was talking about. We went to Sunset and we stayed with Parker Coffin in... It was crazy because I went to Hawaii with no plans. I'd been in the States and was kind of just on the way home, and Harry and Wade and Mikey and like a bunch of crew were going to be there. And I was like, oh, I haven't been back to Hawaii, I'll go. Didn't have anywhere to stay. Rented the car and drove straight to Walmart, bought a mattress, just chucked it in the back of the car and like a blanket. And I was like, well, I'll just sleep in the car. Like, it's so expensive to stay there. Yeah. And I was like, oh, this will make me feel like I'm kind of going back into like probably the glory days of Hawaii.
A true devotee. You're connecting with the kind of monastic pursuit. You know, you're making a spiritual pilgrimage to the Mecca, and yeah, sometimes you got to fucking sleep on the side of the road and you dress in rags. This is like, you see this shit all through India, and we're no different.
Except I had Bluetooth in the car and fucking whatever else luxury.
Well, we got Bluetooth in India too, man.
It's true. But then, yeah, so we ended up... I was hanging out every day with the crew and they were all posted up at Parker's, and he's like, oh, we've got spare room downstairs. Wade and Aton were staying there, and so I ended up crashing in one of the little bunk beds there, and we're literally on the beach in front of Pipe. Like, Parker's house is kind of next to the Volcom house and whatever, and like never in a million years did I think I'd be staying on the like beach at Pipe in front of Pipeline watching it. But the point I was getting to was that we were with Parker, and Parker is just like... Only in the last kind of recent years I've got to spend a bit more time, like just through randomly running into him, and was always a big fan of his surfing. As you know, as a goofy footer to another goofy footer, you're always like got a special spot in your heart for fellow goofies, and I was always like, fuck, Parker is just so good. But he's kind of that quintessential, you know, he's the golden child of the US, him and Connor, and so probably wasn't as like big in Australia as what he was in the US, but obviously if you know surfing and good surfers and films, you've seen him and he's amazing. And then we were hanging out with him and he's just the like same as what myself or Harry or whoever, where you love surfing and you loved surf films and that's all you like care about in a sense when you're growing up. And he's just this wealth of knowledge as well, and he's also got boards on top of that, so then him and Harry are just all day. It's just like you're in Hawaii on the beach at Pipe, pulling out boards, looking at them, talking surf, pulling up surf movies, watching clips, and it was just like so sick.
Pure joy.
Yeah,
you're just marinating in the most cosmic mix of oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins. That's what makes surf trips so magic, when you can just totally give yourself over to pure joy and passion. It's such an insane cosmic mix.
Oh, and being around like-minded people like that just, you know, that's when you really realize you're like, oh, we are a part of this fucking tribe. You know, these true surfers that like, we live and breathe this thing, and it's in us from when we start to when we die. And, you know, back in the day, and kind of like from a company brand context or whatever, you know, those brands were making all those films and you wore Billabong and Quickie because that was your kind of representational way of being like, I'm a part of this group, you know. And I was having a conversation recently about like, I feel like that's been lost a little bit in the last, you know, 10 years or whatever, where it was like, what t-shirt am I going to wear? What graphic is going to like tell who I am? Or people are going to look down the street and, you know, if they don't surf, they're not going to know what this is, but like, I'm going to nod at my fellow, you know, man that's wearing a former t-shirt or whatever it is and be like, I understand what that is. Like, I get that. So I feel like nowadays we're getting a little bit more of that from like brands like Rage and stuff like that, where kids are like, I will wear a fucking hat that says Rage and I will wear it proudly, and it's like my flag. It's part of this community that I'm a part of. And so surf films, I think, are like that too. When you know about this surf film that's come out, or this whatever. It's just that kind of like, we have such a beautiful thing that's not for everyone, and I don't think it should be for everyone, and it should be this kind of, you know, tribal thing that we have, and we're part of this like amazing community worldwide of like, when you're a true kind of frothing surfer, like you get it.
And that's the problem with having this endless profit motive, is that like the way you make endless profit is by making something for everyone, make it as mass appeal as possible. And I actually remember doing an interview with Dane years and years ago, just when he was about to pull the pin on his world tour career. I remember at Portugal Marriott Hotel, sitting there over a couple beers, and you know, just you can let him go sometimes, and he you know, he's a truth teller, man. He's a truth seeker and truth teller, and he'll give you the unvarnished truth. And I remember like one of the things he said in that, he rinsed Quicksilver at the time because of that very reason, making mass appeal clothing. And I remember, I think the line was like, you know, for people who were buying shit at PacSun in Dallas, and like, you know, just like he didn't really want to be associated with that anymore. And he was at that point just beginning tinkering around with making his own kind of brand at that point. I think it was Summer Teeth. Yeah. And interesting to see that kind of that divergent path he took at that exact moment. It basically started. I mean, I think he was still on Quicksilver for a few more years, and weirdly predicted what was going to happen. Chapter 11 bankruptcy was filed. They culled the team, and from that point on, like, he's been on his own wicket, making his own stuff, and with great success. I mean, fuck, man, former shit is everywhere. I see it around, and it is the clobber of the core surfer, the core youth surfer now. It's like, you know, albeit fucking some psycho doof, and there'll be like one dude out of 5,000 in a former t-shirt.
Yeah, like, and you can like wink and nod and or tip your hat and be like, that guy fucking loves getting tubes.
Yeah. You can tell that. Whereas like you can't necessarily tell that off mainstream surf companies anymore. They've lost that association.
I think the big one too is the logo. You notice it like with the logo, right? So you might have 20 former t-shirts to choose from, amazing graphics, working with like epic designers and artists and whatever to do some like epic graphic and go to all this trouble to have this amazing range, and the kid goes and buys the straight up word because that's the one that's going to show that like I represent this brand and I like what they do and I love surfing and I'm like frothing on Dane and Craig. And the same with like wearing a Quicksilver logo back in the day, or like a Rip Curl, any of those. It's like that logo becomes your kind of like, you know, icon for your connection to that group of people or what they're doing. And so, yeah, I see that former stuff everywhere, and you see it more because I think they're wearing the logo tee rather than like if it was a kind of a abstract art print or whatever, you probably wouldn't notice it, but you see it and it's amazing because you just know they're wearing that because they want to be associated with that kind of tribe, which I think that's a really amazing thing to have from a brand when people just are happy just to wear your logo.
And I guess key to that success is having it not blow out, not get too big. It has to retain that level of authenticity and that kind of culture and story that's attached to it.
Yeah.
And that's not easy because you got to make a profit. Otherwise you don't exist in capitalism. So it's a fine line.
It's a fucking fine line between art and commerce, that's for sure. But like, I'm a huge believer of that. Disregarding where your brand is sold or how many people are wearing it, what you are doing as a brand, who you're representing and putting on the team, the projects you're doing, the way that you're upholding yourself as a brand, like that's what makes the brand, you know? Like, I don't believe that if the product is in X store and this store, like everyone else is going to be pissed off or whatever. It's like, no, if people are looking at the brand and they want to see you doing something that resonates with them, and if you're doing that, then that's what they care about, you know, and that's what you should be upholding, is this desire to constantly be like giving to the surf community or bringing films and sponsoring up and coming kids or whatever it is, like keeping this whole ecosystem alive. And I think that's the biggest thing that those brands need to do, is like keep continuing giving to that culture and bringing those things that are like getting kids excited to get up in the morning and go surf. You know, the profit stuff is happening in the background, but if you're not doing that front end stuff, you're not making the films, you're not supporting, like, yeah, that's when you're going to get sidetracked and people are going to be like, what the fuck are these guys doing? Like, what do they stand for? Like, what do they represent? Like, they're just making money? Fuck that.
This is one of the master strokes of having you on board with Forma, is that you bring so much marketing and creative nous to their operation, filmmaking nous. I mean, it's funny talking about like your search for meaning. Like, you have so much pedigree in filmmaking, going right back to your dad's work in Tassie with, you know, bringing the films and showing them right through your career. You know, you basically invented vlogging, Dion.tv. That shit still holds up today. It's fucking, I mean, you might cringe, but it's like very watchable. It's a proper insight into the behind the scenes reality of pro surfers. This was like fucking 15, 20 years ahead of the curve. And then, yeah, working with Kai, obviously you guys made a bunch of surf films early on. And throughout your whole career, you've been very hands-on with design, marketing, film projects. Like, you've had a lot of input on everything you've been a part of. So it's never just been about your surfing, which is rad, you know, and you're a joy to work with in this media capacity. You know, you're always there to pick up the phone and give some eloquent responses about how you know, whatever the topic is. So the whole package is something that, yeah, I can see why Forma are psyched to have you on board, and that is a fucking elite team. But, you know, you're a cultural heavyweight in surfing in a lot of ways. How does the marketing, the creative strategizing, how does it all unfold at Forma? I imagine, you know, Dane's going to be hands-on. He's so passionate about surfing, surf culture. Ventura's a very, like, interesting part of the world from what I've gleaned. I've never been there. You've probably been there, but it's like a very core kind of gritty blue-collar place where, you know, it's got such a long history of elite surfers, but it's like underground kind of, like, that's the steez, right?
For sure. And I mean, look at what he's doing now with, you know, Forma and Chapter 11 as well, and, you know, things like...
And your surf shop. Oh, is that what you mean by
Chapter
Chapter 11?
I was just going to say, Chapter 11, the surf shop, and the media, whatever, company or whatever it is.
The things that he cherished so much about the culture that were lost, he's bringing them back single-handedly, man. It's a fucking amazing thing to behold. Like, people might write Dane off for not having the greatest world tour career and maybe not being as active as they might have hoped. I don't know, he's pretty fucking prolific with Marine Layer, but... at the end of the day, like, he really cares about the culture, and he's investing time, money, and energy into making it the way it should be in his interpretation.
Exactly, and that's kind of that would have been the example that I probably should have used when I was trying to make that point of, like, look at what he's doing and what Chapter 11 is doing and what Forma is doing, and it's like, he's got a fucking surf shop. He's supporting other brands. He's stoking kids out. He's bringing up, like, Mickey Clark and Jake Kelly and, like, other Ventura guys, you know, and creating this, like, culture there. I'm sure it's amazing what that has kind of created in their little hub, let alone, like, what it's done globally, because obviously, you know, their Chapter 11 videos and everything, but looking at that from the outside, and Dane is such a, you know, forward thinker, and once again referencing the past and realizing, you know, what's really kind of special in our industry is having those core surf shops and meeting places for films and the products that you really need. And, you know, it's beautiful what they're doing with that and what Dane's doing. And Dane is a fucking genius, like, incredibly smart, creative dude that just so happens to be, like, the best surfer in the world as well, which is, you know, phenomenal to get all of those things come together in this, like, epic human that Dane is. And so, yeah, I really enjoy watching all the output of him over the years from, like, Marine Layer up until now, you know, and he's one of those guys who's just still there, just still doing it, still fucking absolutely ripping. And so, yeah, he's an absolute icon of the sport, and kind of one of the guys that I think has brought more to the sport outside of just his surfing than just about anyone in the last, like, decade or two.
And talking about your surf cultural pedigree, so, like, obviously you mentioned your dad. Not only was he, like, an instigator of, like, the old school surf film scene, but he ran a charter operation around like Panaitan Island, right?
Yeah.
That's a wild story because that's probably the most or least user-friendly wave on Earth.
Yeah.
It's fucking psycho. And this would have been way back in the day when he was doing this, right?
Yeah, this was like early 90s. For
Fuck,
sure.
who was even signing up for those trips?
Dude, I don't know. Well, I went on quite a few as a Grom. Unfortunately,
what was that like?
Oh, it was insane. I mean, I owe everything to my mum and dad, and specifically, like, as far as my surf career goes, my dad, like, was so supportive as a child and taking me also on those young Indo trips. We would go, you know, do the typical Australian holiday to Bali when I was like, I'm 5 years at the pool in Kuta, like, you know, whatever the hotel was at that point. But once I got to that kind of like 8, 9 years old, Dad started taking me on the boat. So, you know, we'd fly into Jakarta, drive for like 2 or 3 hours to whatever the port was, and then you head out to Panaitan, which, like you said, it's not a user-friendly spot. And I was kind of bodyboarding a little bit. It was just like fluffing around. But I was getting to, you know, we'd have nights in Jakarta and he's taking me through the city. And
Did you get to go to Stadium nightclub?
I didn't go to the nightclub when I was 8, but I wish. He was probably
They would have let you in.
He was probably going when I wasn't there. And, yeah, then also, like, you know, he had this amazing crew of Indonesians working on the boat that became, like, close friends of mine that every time I'd go back, you know, just, you know, what Indonesians are like, the most loving, fucking warm people on earth. And so I was this tiny kid and they just would, like, look after me because everyone would go surf or whatever, and I just end up spending all my time with, like, all the guys on the boat. Like, Manto is still there. I believe he's still working on Just Dreaming now.
No way, that boat still exists, still running that route.
So it's called Just Dreaming. It's still there.
Tap in, Swellians.
Yeah.
They get a couple of fucking roping bone dry cones at one pump. Yeah. Pack the gaff and the mouth guard and the steamer.
Dude, the fucking
and the
Kevlar surf suit. So, like, getting that influence from a young age was something that also played so heavily into my later life of going to Indonesia. And, like, I'd spent so much time there as a kid every year, like, going to Panaitan Island. And so that was incredible to have that and my dad to, like, take me on those trips. And I kind of surfed the last few, and that was, like, I went on a trip with Dylan Longbottom, Simon Massey, like, Shannon Pollard. I don't think it was Jeremy Walters, but there was a couple of, maybe Stamos.
And did you guys get Apocalypse the right on that trip?
Not on the trip we went on, but they had, I think they had come previously. They'd gone. I don't know if Kobe was on that trip, or I think Dylan was on that first one.
Yeah, because he gets the fucking. I had this as a like 12 kilobyte download on the Tracks website. I swear this was like the first online clip. It was almost like a GIF of Dylan in this fucking endless glitch cone at Apocalypse.
Glitch cone.
And yeah, that was like, I was like, wow, the internet's real. That was the first clip I ever consumed on the internet, was Dylan Longbottom.
That's insane. What a clip too. They got it so cooking. So I think the bummer was when we went back on the boat, kind of everyone was like frothing to get Panaitan again or whatever, and we actually didn't get very many good waves. So they were a little bit like, oh, whatever, you know, they still had a good time, but I think everyone was there to kind of get Panaitan or One Palm or whatever. But I was just starting to surf. I don't know if I was sponsored, but I definitely have a board at home with all their signatures and stuff on it. I was riding a shortboard by that time, surfed a couple of the like fatter little lefts and was trying airs and stuff, and remember just being gobsmacked that I was on a trip with like Dylan Longbottom and these guys.
He was so elite in the 2000s and late 90s. Fuck, his surfing was like, talk about futurist. Guy was doing like strapped fucking barrel rolls and shit, backflips, and getting the craziest slabs. Pioneered like pretty much a handful of those waves that are now a staple of surf films, like those boog slabs on the South Coast. He was the first guy I remember surfing him on a stick.
I know we mentioned Noz and Russ and that before, but like, yeah, Dylan, like there's a whole nother pedigree of guys that were like that time period, and him probably at the forefront that were just, you know, the Kobe's, the Hims. There was a few of them that were just fucking gnarly. But yeah, that trip was a really kind of big one for me because it was my first, you know, I wasn't on the trip as a surfer. I was just there as the son of the captain. They were probably like, what the fuck is this kid doing on our boat? I think actually I remember one time this was like tapes, and I had gone to, you know, back in the day, you'd cruise through Cooter and you'd go into like a tape shop and there was all the fucking pirated tapes. So I bought all these like cassette tapes. One of them was like Pearl Jam, Vitology. I think I'd bought like this Simple Minds one, or like might have been Simply Red. At that point, I didn't even know like what the fuck was what I was listening to. I think I was just picking them out from the covers, you know, and pay 5,000 rupees or whatever for them. Because I had a little Walkman, so I went on the boat, and there was one I was listening to, and I loved it, and I want to say it was something like Simply Red or something. I just was like, this is sick, and I kept like putting it on the boat's kind of stereo system. And I remember one day, like it was either Simon Massey or someone, and I think they're on the beers, and they just fucking blew up. They're like, stop playing that fucking tape, and they would eject it and put everyone they were listening to. And I was like, oh shit, all shook, but yeah, you know, I was just there because Dad had obviously been hyped to bring me along on a trip with these guys. And it was really kind of like pivotal moment for me too. I was like, man, that looks cool, getting to be a pro surfer and go on these trips, and I want to do that. So that was my first kind of like mingling in the pro surf world, you know, and they had photographers there and stuff. And it was, yeah.
What prompted your dad to buy a boat in Jakarta, in Java, and run that route? That's a wild venture.
It's funny you say it, because I only found out recently, but he just saw an ad in a magazine. It was in one of the old Trax mags. Actually, I was flicking through an old Trax mag the other day, because I've just got this massive stack of mags, and I'm just pick them up when I'm home, and I found an ad for Just Dreaming for sale in the magazine, and I sent this to Dad, and I was like, holy shit, is this the ad that you saw? And he was like, fuck, I got the year and everything. He's like, fuck, it might have been. Like, that might have actually been the ad. I sent him the cover of the magazine and stuff. And so, yeah, he literally was flipping through tracks, saw that there was a boat for sale in Indonesia. He liked boats, but, you know, probably didn't know much more than your average person knows about a boat or whatever. But him and maybe a couple of buddies just, bought the boat, and then he would just, and you know, he's just a frothing surfer and wanted to be in like warm. Lived in Tasmania, and he fucking loved Indonesia, and so I just think he saw it as an opportunity to be able to have a business that allowed him to go over like, you know, 4 times a year or whatever, and go to Panaitan and surf. And like, he was surfing one palm and shit, which blows my mind, because I'm like, he's a natural footer, but yeah, full helmet, and him and his mates. And
well, did he get done up out there?
I think he probably did, because he stopped surfing it, like I know towards the end. He was like, I'm not surfing that anymore. But
got a high attrition rate, that wave. Like, you definitely couldn't spend a lifetime
surfing it. And the smaller it is, the more gnarly it is too. So, yeah, they would go out there multiple times a year, go surf, whatever. But, yeah, it was just because they wanted to go and surf in Indo, and they just had seen this ad and just
what kind of boat was it?
It was just this, like, 50-foot wooden yacht that I couldn't tell you much more about the boat than that.
Like mint or rickety as fuck?
Pretty rickety. Like, it was definitely a pretty cool old, like, wooden fucking boat that was pretty rickety. I mean, I was a kid, and that was my first ever boat trip, so I didn't really have anything to compare to. Yeah. But it was like, yeah, it was definitely fucking old-ass boat with, like, some mice and shit, eating food and whatever. But, yeah, it was an epic time as a kid to get to go do that. It was like fucking amazing.
And then you move up to the Goldie. The whole family comes up here?
Yeah, so basically in Tassie where I lived, you had to either go to Hobart or Launceston to go to year 11 and 12, or 10, sorry, to year 10. My primary school only went up to year 9 pretty much, and then you had to move. So they'd always toyed with the idea of moving up the Goldie once again to kind of just like be somewhere a bit warmer. And then PBC had a really good surfing program at the school.
Phil McNamara was the coach?
Phil was there.
Fuck,
the last year.
That was an elite surf squad.
Joel and Mick had all gone through it. They'd left like a year or two before I got there. I was essentially like 14, I think. I'd been surfing for only like a year or two. I kind of got in pretty late, but was like getting right into it. Got up there, moved up. Was a surfer, and the teacher obviously was like, okay, well, I'm going to introduce you to kind of these surf guys. They're going to show you around, whatever. First person was Paul Fisher, and the second person was Ryan Hipwood. So they were kind of my crew, and then obviously met all the other surf crew. But like, yeah, to go from a school of probably a couple of hundred kids to PBC with 1,000 kids and Paul Fisher being the first person you meet was fucking psychotic. It was like, I went home crying the first day from school because I got to the school, I was like, this is so big. I don't know anyone and I don't know how to get around. I can't find my classroom. I was just so overwhelmed. And I was like a pretty quiet kid, and you know, I'd never kissed a girl, I'd never drank, I'd never done anything. And then I got there and like people were doing some real rogue shit with girls like in the classroom, you know, people are like doing stuff under the table, and I'm like, whoa, what is that? Like, and then you meet Paul Fisher and he's just the same as he is now, and just this like absolute ball of energy. And so it was a really crazy culture shock to go from Tassie to there, and then, you know, met the Harringtons and the Dorringtons, and like I'm surfing D-bar and snapper every day and living in Currumbin, but like getting the bus or getting lifts to Cooley. So it was crazy, but from a surfing perspective, it was like the best thing that ever happened, because, yeah, Phil McNamara, like you said, and that program, Luke Munro was in his last year when I was there. He kind of left the year I got there. And then, yeah, I just grew up with kind of all these other pretty epic surfers, and it was basically, yeah, the Dorringtons, the Harringtons, like Dean Brady, Goodall, they were kind of sunny coast, but there was a like pretty good crew of young Queensland surfers that we'd all end up competing against, so it just drove that level. And then you'd go and surf snapper, and like Mick and Parko and Dino and Oki are out there, and so it was just, for me, to come from Tassie and just watching surf videos like in Scamander and like writing Gainey like a mail, like a letter, and sending it in the mail because I got his address off like a Pulse ad or whatever, and he sent me like a video with like a handwritten note. And so that was as close as I ever got to like pro surfing, and then to be like in the mecca of it was just crazy.
So crazy. I can't imagine how shocking it would have been for you to see the level of surfing up there at that point.
Insane.
Mind-blowing.
In real life, like I remember I'd never really seen anyone in real life get like a proper barrel, you know, because like especially where I live on the east coast of Tassie is pretty like average beach breaks, and
yeah, and this is also the like beginning of the Superbank too, right?
Yeah, it started. I was actually at the Rainbow Surf Club last night with Dean Harrington, like reminiscing, and we were talking because the sand's all ripped out of there at the moment, and like we were trying to figure out, I was like, fuck yeah, when was that? Because when I first got to the Gold Coast, like as a kid, I would be surfing Greenmount Point and stuff, you know, like sitting just out off the rocks, and that was a whole nother point there.
Yeah, it was like a left sometimes, right?
Yeah, it was like that
kind of Malwave.
Little Marley to Greenmount was like pretty shitty dead zone, and it was just kind of Snapper and Kira, and then all of a sudden
one day it's fucking 14-second drainers.
Linking the whole Damon Harvey's taken off at fucking Snapper and finishing up at Pizza Hut.
God.
It was crazy. So yeah, that was a few years after that, and then the next minute, yeah, you're watching guys getting stand-up 6-second tubes, and I've never even seen a proper barrel. It was like, yeah, it was fucking mind-blowing.
And then you meet Kai. So Kai's from the sunny coast originally?
Yeah, Kai's from the sunny coast.
When did you meet Kai?
We met up on the sunny coast through Dean Brady.
Yeah.
And he was just kind of like filming and surfing, and his dad had a surf shop in Coolum or some, I always get a bit confused with the towns up there, but yeah, his dad had a surf shop there, and so I was hanging around with Brady a bunch, became good friends with him, would go up, stay with him, he'd come down, stay with me. So then the three of us all just became good mates, and that kind of kicked off that era. Kai moved down to the Gold Coast, went to university there, and then, yeah, kind of fell into, like, filming a bunch of stuff together and chasing the Cooley kids around. Like, we never knew any of those dudes, but would just have a camera in the car, and if you saw Parko's souped up, like, VT fucking Commodore wagon or whatever, literally, like, follow them through the streets of Cooley until they surfed, and then go and set up and film him, or like Taj, and he'd be pretty elusive and a hard one to get, but like he'd sometimes show up at Currumbin beachfront and be like, oh fuck, like get the camera out, and he would have just, in hindsight now thinking of it, of him just trying to probably get away from the crowds and everything, go have a surf in between the comp. Next minute, like 2 Groms are down there, like setting up, filming him. He was probably, and he'd always surf like 20 minutes and come in, and we'd be like, oh fuck. But we just didn't really know any of those dudes, but wanted to film them. So yeah, it was that was kind of the hub to be able to do that, though.
Yeah.
You could just kind of post up at D-Bar and someone's going to show up.
Fully, it's like Pokemon.
100%.
Taj was like the extra special Pokemon.
TB was our fucking whatever the top tier. I don't know if it's Pikachu or what, but he was definitely the one we were chasing the most.
And like those films, pretty classic, like pirated, bodgy, like but sick underground films of the fucking best surfers on planet Earth at that point.
Yeah.
All coming to the mecca of high performance surfing at that point, which was the Superbank. And those films, what ended up happening to them? Like what they made on like ASL and like in Japan or something? Was that?
Yeah, it was before that. We like used to edit them when my parents we had an apartment in Currumbin, and I had a little bedroom there with this old like PC, this program that was called DV Storm that we used to use back in the day, and you had to like have this big thing that you plugged your hand cam into to record. It was a really janky setup, but we ended up like making 2 films, Movement and Movement 2, I think.
Fuck yeah, where do we see this? Can we still see it?
You can chase Movement down online.
Sick,
but that,
good tip.
I think, yeah, the first one, I think that came out as a cover mount with ASL. So I think if we'd maybe been making stuff before that, I don't remember if we did it one and sold it in Japan before, but yeah, you can track that one down online. We maybe did a second one, but we were selling them to this distributor in Japan. I don't even know how it came about. I was kind of like working with Surfing Australia at the time as well. I was not sure if I was going to do professional surfing or get into filmmaking, and my dad was working at Surfing Australia, so I got an internship there to do like film and media. So that was kind of when I was doing the junior series. I used to go on surf heats in the junior series, have to run back to my room, go and get the like 600 lens and the camera, run down, shoot all the heats of the juniors, go back, and then I would go into my like email and have this database of all the like local newspapers from around Oz, and I'd be like sending Ellis Erickson's photo to the Valor fucking press or whatever, like picking where these groms are from, going back, distributing out the images to like their local newspapers, then running back down and surfing the next heat. Wow. So I was doing that for Surfing Australia for a while. And then I think we met this Japanese distributor somehow through that. So kind of at the time, I think we were selling them for like $2,500, $2,000 or something for like this fucking 40-minute film we'd spent a year making or whatever. And he just took it over there and probably sold, I don't know how many copies. But yeah, it was at the time we were frothing. Like we'd got paid to do it. And yeah, some of them came out as ASL cover mounts. And then they're those bootleg weird Japanese VHSs that I made all the covers in like Adobe, in Paint on the computer. Like they're so janky if you find them. Yeah, it was pretty nuts set up. So
crazy too, the trajectories both your careers take, like, and they intertwine many times. Like most famously, I guess, with the Modern Collective, right? That was Kai's big project, his kind of first solo project, was it, given to him, or like kind of facilitated by Taylor Steele. Yeah. And fuck man, like what an assemblage of talent that was to be a part of. Like, psycho. To this day, like, don't know if there's been you probably got to go back to the Billabong Super Challenges to find, like, a collection of talent that fucking stacked in a single film project. Geordie, Dane, Dusty, yourself, Yaden. Craig's got a little cameo in there. Yeah, especially at a time when Kai was kind of like, that was his breakthrough, whatever. So not only like the surfers, but then Kai is like this incredible filmmaker and his kind of like first big project or whatever. And the way that he spun it and put that film together in like the most futuristic fucking way at that time it was just like a boiling pot and Taylor's backing and everything like that. And a golden era of kind of surf, or the, still pinnacle time of big premieres and sponsors throwing down to sponsor the films. And so it was just this perfect like collaboration of Kai and all the surfers and everyone just came together into this kind of like pretty special project that at the time I was so lucky and grateful to be a part of, because I definitely felt like there was other surfers and like better dudes than me that could have been in there, so to be a part of it was like super special for me. And then Craig, that was kind of like, I think his big first thing. I remember
I had injured myself when we were filming for the movie, so I had to pull out of the reunion trip, which
that was
Geordie
a crazy part of the film.
Yeah,
That
Geordie, Mitch, and Craig.
That's right, Colborne. Can't forget Colborne from that team.
Oh,
Holy
Colborne's
shit.
backhand surfing in that is
Amazing.
like fucking to this day. Like if someone went and did that, it's phenomenal. And
There's like Ryan Callanan, backside cartwheeling finners.
yeah, he had like a really powerful one of those, and so those guys went nuts. I think they surfed St. Lou a little bit, but yeah, Craig, that was kind of like his breakout. And I remember at the time, I think it was like an old ASL DVD had come out, and it was a junior one of their junior movies. And I remember seeing this footage of Craig, and he was surfing somewhere in Foster, long kind of running left, and I was just like, whoa, who is this kid? Like, I just remember it was the first time I'd seen him, and I was like, damn, this guy's sick. Like, such a cool, different style I'd seen, and he was still super young. He was probably only 18 or something at that time, and I remember we would talk about him, and I'd be like, man, this Craig's mental, like, blah, blah, blah. And then when it came to me not being able to go on that trip, I think there was a few names getting thrown around, Marzo, maybe Julian, or maybe Julian had been asked to be a part of Modern Collective but then didn't do it. I think maybe because he was working on his own project and probably just had a bunch of stuff going on. But I think he was, I probably got the call up because he wasn't going to do it or something. I don't know. But there was names getting thrown around for this reunion trip, and it was kind of Craig, Clay, maybe Julian. And Ando ended up going on it and just, obviously fucking ripping in that part. And so I think that was kind of his first big kind of film piece, and then obviously after that just blew the door off. But yeah, that was a really special project, that one. And the other day actually it was funny because I was talking to someone, Grom, we were with, it wasn't me, but someone else was talking about Modern Collective, came up in the conversation, and this Grom, like a good sponsored young surfer, was just like, what's that? And I was like, oh, fuck, I'm old. Oh, shit. Like, that's crazy because it just was one of those, like, such a pinnacle film that I just kind of assumed that, for another 10 years, maybe people would still know about it, or it would be like something you would watch as a Grom or something. But it's kind of, I realize now it has been that long since that movie came out that, like, kids now don't dig back that far, perhaps, and hadn't seen it. I think you would find a lot of Groms probably have, but
we'd have to re-release it online somehow, like, you know what I mean? Because it's so far back in the fucking search engines and algorithm, like, it's lost. No one had a hard copy of that thing.
Yeah, it was DVD, and then I think it came out.
It was DVD?
Yeah, it came out, Modern Collective, DVD, and it came out it's on iTunes, I'm pretty sure.
Right.
Yeah, so I think you can go on and buy it on iTunes as far as I know.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, right. So what was it like being a part of the rollout? Like, you mentioned all the premieres and, like, fucking hell, man, like that's the other part of your career, and that was what was kind of cool about Dion.tv. Like, you're bringing us into the debauchery that we all know exists. Like, it exists at the club surfing level. So, like, and every club has pros in it. So, like, that, like, the fucking elite are, like, just going ballistic out there. And, like, what was that like? I mean, you guys are all young and single and just traveling the world, absolutely ripping the bag, so to speak.
I mean, it was nuts. I mean, it was you got given the golden ticket as a kid. Like, luckily for Steve Douglas at Globe gave Bez and I the golden ticket to, like, travel the world. I'd gone and done a trip with Taylor Steele and came back, and Greg Browning had been doing the drive-through series, so I kind of went to Steve and Globe and pitched him on doing this, like, version of the drive-through kind of, but, like, online, because no one was really doing, like, online surf stuff at that time, and that was kind of how Dion TV came about. And Globe at the same time, Steve was like, you're not going to believe it, kind of had the same idea. So he was like, I want you guys to go out, here's a camera, go just document everything you're doing. Doesn't have to just be surf, just go and, like, have fun and show kind of behind the scenes, like you were saying. So we did that, and I think we did it for, like, 10 years or something.
Really?
Yeah, I think we either got to, like, 99 or maybe just clicked over to 100 episodes or something. But we did it for quite a while, and yeah, my favorite things as a Grom growing up was like sabotage and montage, seeing like a 1 second shot of the back of TB in the back of a limo, you know, sitting there with a babe or whatever, or, you know, they're at some party or something. He's just like, any of those glimpses that you got into the kind of lifestyles of those guys, I was like, fuck, that's what I want to see. Like, I want to know what they do outside of the water. Like, what are they getting up to? And so I don't think that was like the driving force for the series, but it was just us filming everything that we were doing on the road, and, you know, it just ended up kind of gaining a bit of momentum and popularity because it just, like, there wasn't any other stuff like that on, I guess, on the net at the time.
Well,
and
surfing, like, the industry and the media at that point was so vanilla and cookie cutter, and like all of that degeneracy that is really at the core and heart of the culture in a lot of ways. Experimentation, partying, drugs, like hedonism, like that for me is like a large thrust for why I even thought surfing was cool as a Grom. And all of that was totally like kept beneath the surface by the media. It was, I don't know why, like, I guess, like, again, when you chase endless profit motives, you have to appeal to the mass market, and they want it to be all like PG and shit.
Yeah.
So like any sniff of that culture of hedonism and partying, like you mentioned, it could be a fucking 1 second snippet in a surf film. You're like, you just get this little glimpse, a little portal for 1 second into like the madness, and you're getting fed these stories at your board riders club about, like, you know, fucking dudes just getting blasted with some fucking pro of the time, and you're like, wow, like I really wondered what that world was like. And I can remember like pitching, like, back when I was working at Stab in the early days, going like, man, just send me on the QS, like I'll just fucking go on the queue and I'll just like fucking party my coit out, and that'll be the article. The stories will just be like absolute like decadent and depraved degeneracy on that tour, because you know it's going down, and for some reason we're not allowed to talk about it. And like you couldn't even talk about fucking a pro surfer smoking a joint. Like, it was dismal because like there was just so much paranoia around that culture, which was so bizarre because that's what surf culture was. And the weird thing is, though, you know, as I get older, like the way that underground surf culture really celebrates decadence and indulgence as if they're good things, like that, like what's considered the ultimate metric of being core is like how much fucking drugs and alcohol you can do, and how little self-care you can do, and like how hard you can charge on the back of being a fucking raging degenerate. The basically the Andy Irons like formula for living and life. But as we know from Andy's, you know, sad tale, like there's a pretty short life expectancy attached to that lifestyle. So that's something surfing has to come to terms with. But on the flip side of that, like, I really do enjoy for me, it's like the culture of like psychedelics and surfing. And I think like psychedelics have such a place in a therapeutic context, in a spiritual context, that they're actually a really meaningful compound that really, I think, had a lot to do with modern surf culture's inception, from the board design to the traveling to the filmmaking.
Sure.
I think like you can't disconnect that from LSD and psilocybin. I mean, the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, the Laguna Beach based kind of surf clan who saturated the world with millions of doses of orange sunshine LSD, and like you know, that included Mike Hinson, the Endless Summer fucking icon, John Peck, the guy who invented like backside tube riding at Pipe. Like, some of the most elite surfers from the day were like so heavily involved in that compound. Wayne Lynch, another devotee to the spirit molecule, you know, such a big part of the culture. But the fucking, if I'm to be honest in my take on things, like the limos, the coke, the champagne, the fucking all that shit, the womanizing, like all that stuff, like it's fun, but man, it's not got a lot of legs in it. It'll leave you feeling pretty hollow and shit, and might even kill you.
So, I mean, quite soul destroying. And I think also, like you said, the psychedelic, you know, I think a lot of the time people plug those things, let's say using psychedelics in the same kind of way they would using more hardcore drugs and partying and stuff like that. Whereas to me, those two things are completely separate.
They're
when you're
separate.
talking about taking mushrooms or LSD or smoking weed or whatever, like those aren't party drugs, or I don't look at those as party drugs. And what I look at them as ways to like expand my mind and be in nature. And like I enjoy picking mushrooms and like using it for like medicinal purposes last year when I was kind of going through that tough time. And it actually was a really integral part to helping me get through that, was kind of microdosing these mushrooms that I would go and pick from next door to like where I was living up here on the North Coast, you know. And even just that kind of like hunter-gathering fucking evolutionary whatever of going and getting this thing and doing all the stuff that I had to do to then like be able to microdose it. And you know, I wasn't trying to get high. I found that it was really helping me manage anxiety and kind of like, I wouldn't say depression, but just like anger too. Like there was a lot going on, and it really helped me kind of like soften everything. So it was a really beneficial thing for me last year. And like I said, I don't look at it as like a party drug, and I treat it with so much respect. And like, I want to be in nature and I want to be by myself, or like, you know, with close friends. I'm not using that to go out to a fucking pub and drink or whatever. You know, I've never been that big into taking drugs. My parents were super against it when I was growing up. And so that was kind of drummed into me from a young age. I think my dad, one of his friends, had a really bad experience with smoking weed when he was young. And I think he lost his mind. And my dad was always like super anti-drug, which was amazing growing up, because, you know, when I got to the Gold Coast and everyone's fucking doing pingers and like smoking weed and whatever, like I didn't drink till I was probably 17, 18. And then, you know, I definitely didn't touch like pingers and shit like that when I was a kid, which, you know, we were going to Elsewhere and surfers and people were just raging and I would just drink. But yeah, I think
which is ironic, because like fucking alcohol is so much more toxic than MDMA in my opinion. Like, but like when abused.
Oh, for sure.
As it
and I mean,
so often is.
I can imagine too, like you would have had footy players hugging surfers in surfers that at that time on MDMA instead of punching each other in the head. Like the amount of times we nearly got completely bashed up there because of a bunch of like roided up, drunk as fuck footy players, like, and us just being these little blonde head surfers just getting fucking chased around Cavill Ave.
Fuck.
But yeah, the separation for me for like, you know, the psychedelic kind of realm of drugs, or, you know, compared to like fucking coke and all that kind of shit, is like completely
worlds apart.
Different, yeah.
Mate, talk to us as well about signing on with Globe, Secret Machine. I think it was like your first kind of project with them, but fucking hell. Like, you know, some of the assemblages of talent you've been a part of are so next level. Like that film in particular, again, still stands up today. I was just watching it before. Like the Hobgood brothers, the surfing they're doing then is wild, man. It's fucking wild. Like CJ's doing these like backside, like kind of like lean oops or something, lean, whatever
like,
they are.
Yeah, they're like kind of Gorkin flips, but like just a lean grab.
Yeah,
a couple of them that he did over, I feel like, his career in various
like there's
films,
the iconic one at HT's, and I don't think that turn's really been done since.
Nah.
Like, I can't remember it, which is crazy, because you watch it, it's so functional and radical, and like, you know, like those guys in particular, the Hobgood brothers, like they were like a kind of once in a generation talent, like on a pegging with your AIs, your Parkos, your Slaters, your Mix, like, but because their competitive records didn't really reach that level, although, you know, CJ did win a title, they don't really get mentioned in the same breath. But like watching that film, and I mean, I don't really need to tell them, because I was a huge Hobgood devotee in those days. But yeah, rewatching that film, I was like, fuck, man, like so good in the juice, in slabs, like kind of any kind of condition, so well rounded. Yeah,
that weird Florida thing of like being able to surf a 1 foot wave and then somehow being an absolute psycho when it's big. And yeah, like CJ's iconic wave at Chopes, his paddle one, when, you know, there'd only really been waves like that had been towed at that point. And so Damien in, I mean, a million different films, but, you know, on the Globe train, like in Strange Rumblings in Shangri-La, like out Greenbush.
Oh yeah.
You know, and like maybe people have seen Greenbush, you know, you've seen it a bunch now, so but being out there in the water, a part of that session and watching the way he like approached that wave and his like grit and determination and CJ was always the same, like to the point where they're like paddling for a wave and they're like grunting and like there's just this look in their eye, and then Damo, you know, he's just such a little chunky unit, and actually funnily the first wave he got in that session, you know, paddled out, it was terrifying, big chunky Greenbush, it was just there but it was like pumping. And he just straight away turns on the first set, goes, boom, just starts weaving through this giant cave. Some of them were closing out. You had to kind of be careful which ones to pick. Goes quite shallow, and there's big, like, coral heads on the end bit. And so he goes over the falls, lands on his back on a fucking coral head, just gets destroyed, like, whole back's bleeding, whatever. Bomb set comes, he's on there, he swims down, grabs onto a coral head, has to like wear the set on the head while he's just on the inside, so just hugging the reef. Paddles back out. Obviously, we don't know any of this until he gets back out. He gets close, and we're like, dude, you're bleeding. And he's like, oh, yeah, I just got like put on a coral head, and then I had to swim down and like grab on and hug it while the next set came. And blah, blah, blah. And we're like, I'm just like, oh my God, this guy's just fucking bleeding everywhere in the lineup, and he's just like frothing to. And then he just went on to, like, demo the session with, like, blood coming out everywhere. And it's just, like, those two guys, there's just this grit in them that's so gnarly. But then they're also these incredible small wave surfers. And like you said, Siege with those backside lean, like, flips. And there's also, like a upside-down alley-oop thing in this trip we did to Mexico that's in the end of Strange Rumblings. That's crazy that he just, like, busts out one day, this, like, fucked up weird air that no one's ever seen, and I'm like, these guys are so insane.
So insane, yeah. He's doing these backside finner shove-its in Secret Machines.
Right. Yeah,
riding out switch, like.
Going vert and then, like, grabbing and shoving and coming back down, like
belting the section. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck, man.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's crazy surfing. It's so futuristic for the time and so functional.
And I think even if you dig back into like Somewhere, Anywhere, Everywhere as well, like, yeah, that catalogue of Globe films is phenomenal.
It's a phenomenal catalogue, man. And so is that all Joe G?
It's all Joe G.
Right.
Yeah, Joe G and George Manzanilla, who's the kind of editor, Joe's right-hand man and has been forever. Somewhere, Anywhere, Everywhere, I believe, was like the first kind of big one. I might be forgetting something, so I hope I'm not, but at least, like, for me, anyways, in that kind of Globe era of surf films, that was the one I remember them going to the premiere at Twin Towns in Cooley, and TV's rocking up in, like, a Hummer limo, and Ocky's there in a suit, and, like, it just was this whole, it was, like, the height of kind of, like, Globe probably spent fucking 200 grand on that night, or maybe probably more, I don't know. It was just, like, this, there was a red carpet, and it was insane, probably during the Quickie Pro, I think, and so that to me was the first big one, and then they went on to do fucking Secret Machine, and then Year Zero, and then Strange Rumblings in Shangri-La, and there was an offshoot film of Secret Machine, which is called New Emissions of Light and Sound.
That's right. That's got that crazy tripped out soundtrack to it.
Yeah, the guy,
some DJ put
DJ
together.
Sasha.
Yeah,
and I guess he's like a big music producer in. I think he's from the States, electronic music. We actually went to Miami and premiered the film there during the Electronic Music Festival. They have there once a year.
Whoa.
And they hired out this white mansion and, like, projected the film up on this big white wall in some, like, rich Miami dude's fucking multi-million-dollar house. And, like, there's all these crazy, like, Miami crew there, and me and Joe G. And, like, it was just a wild... The things that I got to do, and, like, the journey that kind of took me on was just insane. Yeah,
man, that's so cool. That is like, that reminds me of that story where I think Pink Floyd are watching George Greeno's footage at some film festival, and then like that creates that collaboration where Pink Floyd end up making the music for Echoes, and it's like probably the greatest artistic collaboration in human history, in my opinion. But yeah, just that kind of the grand visions of bringing in just other influence, like the biggest music producers of the time or the biggest underground music producers of the time with the best surfing, and it's like all like this underground like really strong artistic push and like combining like cultural heavyweights from multiple disciplines to create some amazing spectacle, which of course finds its home on a fucking white wall at some giant cocaine mansion in Miami. Amazing. Well played, Joe G.
Yeah, I mean, he's done it. He also did it with Year Zero was Black Mountains scored the film for that. So he did like a lot of work with the band, their Canadian band, like incredible fucking band that he went and did this film score with, and they used some existing tracks and then scored a lot of stuff. And that's something we see a lot more happening these days, but like, and, you know, obviously back in the past, but it hadn't kind of been done for a while. And then he went out and kind of worked with them to do this thing, to kind of keep a bit more of a cohesive narrative throughout the film too, you know, rather than it just being like fucking Pennywise to Foo Fighters to whatever, you know. It's like it kind of tied that whole project together. But yeah, Joe G has probably been one of the biggest influences on my life, and he's like a fucking brother to me. The amount of time I've like spent with him and his family in California, you know, it was like my second home over there, and his beautiful wife Paula and their kids, and just like it was kind of my little family away from home over there. And then also like my creative kind of guru / like got me on all these films, and yeah, just owe a lot to Joe.
Yeah, man. Yeah, such a forward thinker, and you know, one of the real unsung heroes of like 2000 surf culture. Like he brought so much to it, and I don't know how or like what his kind of cultural background is and his kind of surf lineage, but fuck, man, he brought for me so much, particularly in the just the, like you said, that cohesive musical arc, and like kind of bringing in like major influences that were outside of surfing but were like passionate participants who wanted to be a part of it. And like that's rad. I love when surfing is able to kind of find other influences that aren't just like your same old like punk rock, like that coastal surf town kind of culture. I like the bigger picture shit that's coming out of the big urban centers. Yeah,
and he's kind of one of those guys that had travelled quite a bit for surf stuff. He was working for Taylor Steele doing editing way back in the day when they were probably in Encinitas in fucking Taylor's shed or something like that. I think George and Joe both came out of there, and then he went on to Globe. But yeah, he's a very well-travelled man with interests far outside of surfing, and his musical taste is just like second to none. I mean, to me, Secret Machine is such an underappreciated modern surf film of like fucking an insane artistic output. Like the soundtrack, the 16 they shot, the kind of story, not like the storyline and the stuff they did with that as well, but like I don't know if that's the one that has like all the Timothy Leary like voiceovers and stuff in it. And it might be someone else, but just the way that movie's edited as well. You know, there's a knife track that they used in there to like demo surfing a big right that I think is just down across the border of San Diego or whatever, and it's just there's so many
that
nuanced
crazy. It
little
looks
things.
like fucking North Point.
Yeah,
it's huge.
Demo out the break wall in France. Huge to yeahs, Gold Lion, like there was just at that time. All
and they're
these
big
tracks.
Artists, like that's a big budget, big spend. For
they were
the
spending,
department.
and they'd be paired along something that you just had never heard before, and it was just a real eclectic mix from your rock to your electric to whatever. So yeah, he's a very has a very broad scope of
and a strong vision. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And mate, like talking about broad scope, like you end up living in New York City for a period, which is and Stockholm before that.
No, I've spent a bit of time there. Like as Warren, who I moved to New York with as well. We spent probably like a month or so there one time in the fucking not dead of winter, it was November, but it was snowing and it was fucking freezing with like minimal daylight. We would just party at night and then sleep in and wake up pretty much as the sun was going down. So it was kind of got pretty depressing by the end. And like, if you're there when it snows and it doesn't settle, then it becomes this slush, and we had like sneakers and we're walking around in like...
With your globe skate shoes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Warren had some steezy fucking, you know, leather boots or something, but we didn't have the appropriate gear for what we were getting into. So we were there for like a month and a half. New York was quite a bit longer. I think Warren was there for like 5 or 6 months. I was there for like 3 or 4 months, and that was probably more than enough time that I needed to do that, because we didn't surf once. I did one trip, which was to Mexico. It was when we were shooting for Lost Atlas, and I remember Bez flew over to New York, and I hadn't seen him in months. It was kind of towards the end of the trip, I think, and I also hadn't surfed in like a while. And I just remember he rocked up. We had an apartment in Greenpoint, and just opening the door one day, and he reckons he just looked at me, and I mean, he looked at me and he was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like pasty and pimply and had put on like a bunch of kilos, and he was just like, "Fuck, dude, you need to go start surfing again." And we went on this trip to Mexico for Lost Atlas, and luckily somehow like managed to still get some stuff, but definitely remember going on the trip being like, wow, this is not a good career move. Like, I'm kind of in kind of peak surf time. I need to be working hard. And I was writing for this company, Neff, at the time, which was like a beanie hat company from maybe Ventura, somewhere around there. They had a shitload of money that came from snowboarding. The guy, Sean Neff, that ran it was a legend. And I remember going into his office before I went to New York, and he was like, "Oh man, sorry we haven't paid you for, whatever, how long it was. We've had some issues with like international transfers," something like that. And I was like, "Oh, it's all good. I know it's coming." And he was like, "Fuck, you know what? I'm just going to get someone to run down and like get the cash for you now." And I was like, "Okay." So he like runs down. Someone runs down, comes in, and they're like, "Here you go," and just hands me this like yellow envelope, and it was just 10 grand stack in like this envelope, literally like a day before I was flying to New York. And so I was just got there, and just every morning I'd wake up and just go like, take like 1 or 2 out, and then just go and walk around the city with Warren, and like we just would, just gorge on everything that we could as far as like art and music, and just trying to, I'd never lived in a big city like that. So I, like the purpose of the trip was to be like, I think Warren had already planned on doing it, and we were such close mates, and we had done time in Stockholm together and a couple of times, and traveled around a bunch. And so we were like, let's go get into it, and it was like, seemed like New York to us at that time was just kind of like a really epic epicenter of amazing music and stuff going on. So yeah, every night we were seeing shows. There was like this website kind of like thing that we could look at, and I think it was called All My Rockness. I don't know if it still exists, but I was just baffled that every night of the week there was, tens of shows going on. So like there was never a night we didn't go out and like go and see music and whatever. And luckily for me, Warren was like so tapped into that world, and he was another huge influence on my whole career and my life. And he's such a intelligent, articulate, incredibly talented like artist and surfer, and he kind of just opened up this whole other world to me, because when I had kind of got spat out of the Goldie and stuff like that, I probably didn't have the tools to be able to navigate places like New York on that level of like where he was kind of taking me, and the things he was showing me was these friends and these people he knew in like these different scenes. So that was a really integral kind of point, and Warren really kind of took me on that and showed me this like amazing other side of the world and this city and the fast pace, and just, it was amazing, and saw so many things that probably, later in life became like contributing factors to various projects and stuff like that.
Exactly, yeah. Oh man, you've had some good mentors. Shout out to Warren Smith wherever he is. Man, influenced me too. Put me onto Democracy Now! Actually, funnily enough, I'm a fucking university graduate, like media student, but it took Warren Smith to dial me into the pretty much anarchist news network. But yeah, mate, the guy is bizarrely well read and well informed. Like you know, fuck Noam Chomsky, Democracy Now. Like his music taste, his like surfing, skating. Like the guy's across so much culture. What was your most New York experience or New York story? Something that really sticks with you from that time?
Oof. Jeez.
A lot to flick through.
Yeah, there was well, at that time, Warren and I used to have a, it's just not like going to be like a crazy fucking story, but it was pretty important part of our trip, and something that was like pretty important to me was we started this thing called Proxy Noise, which was like this photography zine thing that basically it came about because he was writing for Insight, I was writing for Globe, and we were like, how the fuck do we spin this that we're doing something here in New York City? Like, what is going to make us look like we're doing something here? And also, how can we be productive while we're here in New York? So a lot of that trip was about photography and like shooting when we were there. So we would travel around the city shooting constantly. So like when I go back and look at those proxy zines and stuff, there was all these amazing like memories of times of people that would come and stay with us and stuff. But to be honest, it was just every day we'd sleep in because we'd gone out the night before. We'd literally get up at like, and it was summer, so it was hot as fuck. It was just shit walking around the city. It's like stinking and 1,000,000 degrees. We'd sleep in till 3, walk around, shoot photos, go museums, whatever, figure out what we're going to do that night, catch up with friends, have some beers, have some food, and then it would just go again into like gig, go out, party. Four Loko had just like showed up on the scene in the States, which was like that really toxic fucking energy drink, alcoholic energy drink or whatever. But we figured out that if you poured out your Arizona iced tea that was the same size as the Four Loko, you could pour that out, fill that up, and then jump on the train and just like cruise around everywhere. And by the time you got to the gig, you were like fucking flying, just jacked up on like this crazy energy drink with God knows how much booze in it. But to be honest, every night was just kind of this like, it was the same thing over and over again. We just did that for like months on end, but seeing so much incredible music and just, yeah, it was, to be honest, it's kind of a blur. But when I do go back through all the old proxy kind of stuff, that will trigger like memories for me of times that were there. But yeah, it was definitely time to get out. When Baron rocked up and saw me fat, pasty and pimply, I was like, it's probably time to go. I think I'd probably gone through the last of my stack of Neff cash too. And so thankfully at the time the States was a bit cheaper than it is now. But yeah, that money pretty much just got me through the whole time there. I think it was just every day dig into that. So yeah, it was a really fun time. We definitely like made the most of being in the city.
Mate, and it's so sick, like looking at where you're at now, you're a part of so many interesting projects, like Pocky, right?
Was it Pocky? Yeah, for obviously the last like 14 years. But
14 years, fuck, time flies.
Yeah,
wow.
Pretty much since the first iteration. I actually left last year.
Okay.
Just personal reasons, and was kind of time for me to move on. And it was just such a beautiful time of my life, getting to work with the surf team and the films and Kai, and it was like something that I can look back on and be really proud of. And the design element of that, you know, like when I walk down the street now and see people wearing those shades, it's like, it's such a crazy feeling to see random people wearing stuff that you've like designed and put your heart and soul into and made. And so, you know, after all the years of seeing it quite a bit, and it just was still like have to pinch yourself and be like, wow, that's so special to have something that people want to put on their face and wear around. And so that was a beautiful time. They're still, you know, the brand's still thriving and doing amazing stuff. But yeah, I kind of went off to pursue other things with Former, and I kind of needed a break for a while. And because just last year for me was a bit of a transition year for stuff. So yeah, and then got offered a job this year with a new, I guess we're in 2025 now, but the end of last year with a new company that some friends were starting, and basically gave me free reign to kind of do whatever I wanted with that. And it's kind of in the Globe family. So, you know, with people I've worked with for a long time. So that was a really special opportunity for me to be able to get given, because I was kind of not sure what I was going to do after a Pocky, and was probably just going to take some time to chill. And you know, I would like to say focus on surfing, but I also didn't have a sponsor at the time. So there was a few things going on as to why I was a bit like, you know, lost and trying to figure out what I was doing and where I fit. So then, yeah, the new project's called Ritual Vision, and that's with Mikey Wright, Harry Bryant, Noah Dean. We just signed on Miller Coco Brown and Holly Warren. So already like a really strong little team, and kind of the goal of that is just to, the same thing as always, try and make surf films and have an epic fucking surf team and hopefully give something back through premieres and sponsoring Groms and getting them psyched and all the things we've kind of talked about. That's, you know, that's any time I'm kind of doing something. When I was asked to be involved, I was like, I will come and help, but this is kind of like all I'm interested in, you know. If this is the thing, I don't care about, you know, trying to make money so much as like getting to work with a team of surfers. And it gets, Steve Hill always had a quote to me that was like, even if you're not surfing and you're not getting paid to surf, like you've got to set yourself up to be able to be working with a brand that allows you to keep being on the road and traveling with your friends and still being a part of that culture that you love and making those films and stuff. It's like, that's what's important to you. So even though you might get to a point where you're not going to be in front of the lens like surfing, you're still going to be able to enjoy going on these trips, going to the places we're talking about, going to see new cultures and traveling with your friends, and hopefully making these, like, you know, films. That to me is kind of like what gives me most joy in my life, is like working on those projects. So that's kind of the main goal for Ritual. And there's never been a project with Mikey, Noah and Harry either, which is crazy, because those three dudes together is like,
wow.
And, Wade Carroll is obviously like kind of the backbone of the whole thing too, because he's the filmmaker that ties everyone together, and he's kind of who I bounce all ideas off and stuff. And so that 3-pack together is just, you know, and we're obviously with Holly and Miller, it's just like fucking get those people all feeding off each other, and shit's gonna go down for sure.
Cannot wait to see the films you guys put out. You know, those three surfers, there's not three surfers on earth I'd rather watch more. Mikey Wright in particular, fuck, mate. Easy to forget that the cunt was toweling up John Florence when he was on the world tour. Like, he's that kind of level of surfer, and it's kind of easy to forget that sometimes, because, you know, his offerings are quite far apart, but like Ando, it's like when you see one, you're like, fuck, like you just get reminded immediately what a raw talent he is. And the other two names you mentioned, in particular, Harry and Noah, like just, you talk about big punts, big slabs, like those guys are doing the most risky, bravado, like courageous surfing, and you just can't not watch it. There's so much potential for injury, and the surfing, the turns, the punts, the pits, like all of it is just like steroids shit, like fucking souped up to the max.
It's crazy. They all have such this like part of them that is this mongrel switch or whatever, you know. And even with Holly and her like power surfing, to me she's like one of the most powerful women surfers in the world, and you don't see that much of her. So I'm really excited to like get her in some good waves and see more of Holly like fucking just ripping the biggest like frontside hack you've seen. And then Miller, absolute phenom, that I think in the next few years the things that we're going to see from Miller is going to be really crazy. And we were talking about it the other night, because I was like, you've just got this craziest frontside flat spin air rev that not many people can do. That this like whip thing that you do, that's like, it's a very nuanced
helicopter
little
spin,
like,
it's wild.
Flat heli thing, and like the way she twists, and you know, everyone can do air reverses and whatever, but there's something she does that's, I see it in Chipper and you see it in a few other people, but also from like a 17-year-old, I'm just like, there's something there. And it's her skating. So she comes from a skate background, and I didn't realize that she was training for the Olympics and stuff in skating.
Are you joking?
So yeah, we've kind of just become, you know, friends, and we're working together, going to be working together more and more this year. And the big goal is to like, you know, make her fucking as big a part of this film as Harry and Noah and those guys. And she fucking charges. So they just did that trip to Micronesia for the contest over there.
Yeah, the natural selection. She was on that.
She was on that, and Harry was just, by the end of the trip, because I was talking to him and talking to her, and he's like, mate, Miller is the fucking real deal. It's like, she's blown my mind on this trip. You know, it's like a fucking heaving 8-foot reef, like really hard backbench takeoff, like scary, sharp fucking nut. It's where that Nathan Florence tried to go and surf, and it's just like such a hard wave to get into. Apparently she just owned that. So once again, that combo of like the airs, her turns are fucking epic, and she charges. So each one of those people, and then Wade pulling them all together in like a film context, I feel like we did a trip to Puerto Rico already, got cooking waves, and seeing Mikey and Harry, they had never done a trip together. And it was like fucking 8 to 10 foot, kind of a couple of days we were there, and those two just feeding off each other, and they will just surf all day. They'll go out and just grind and surf and fucking charge and rip like massive turns, and you just like, it's just like live action blowing your fucking mind. And I hadn't done a trip with Mikey either, and getting to watch him in the flesh is fucked up, because we would every morning we're up at 5 cooking like boiling eggs, getting ready for the day, like got a surf vid on, has us there like wet and dry sandpapering the bottom of his board and like fucking touching up his wax and taking his fins out, polishing him. Like he's just like obsessed with like his equipment and making sure it's all perfect. Always a surf film on in the background, you know, so we're firing up the Bruce movie every morning or whatever it was. And Mikey would just be like, oh, what's this? We'd be like, oh, it's the Bruce movie. And he'd be like, oh, like, I don't know if I've seen that. But he'd be like, but fuck, wait, let us show you this. And then he'd put on this clip of like some dude reeling in a popper and like some big GT slamming it. And he's like, oh, that was mental. It was so good. And then he'd talk about how he's at home, and I'm like, do you surf like a bunch when you're at home? He's like, oh, like, you know, if it's small and whatever, like, nah. He's like, well, why would I bother? I'll just go fish or whatever. And I'm like, and then you see him go on a trip, and he might not have surfed for fucking weeks or whatever, or he's been chilling at home, and he goes out and does the most fucked up surfing you've ever seen, and had picked up like 10 Ryan Birches. He had his JSs and his Birches, and he just waxes up these like craziest looking fucking ASIM Birches that you're like, waves are cooking where they're filming, and you're like, that's a lot of pressure, or like it's a crazy mentality to have to go on a trip. And he had ridden Birches before, so he's got a lot of like faith in him, but you're kind of there like, fuck, what if these things just don't work or whatever? And
this is that big crazy right that like him and Cale Walsh and Rollo were surfing in what was it, Saturn or one of Wade's films?
I think they went to this particular spot in Saturn, but I think they also went to that spot in Reunion where it's big heaving rights. That's that right-handed Geordie was doing all the airs, and so there's that, and maybe it was kind of big in Saturn there. I don't remember so
like,
much.
They just surf this. It's not the fucking closeout slab, I don't think, that fucked Rollo up. It's like another one in Puerto Rico. It's like it's so big and perfect and heavy. It's like very Hawaiian style.
Yeah, true.
And they're going psycho out there. Mike is he's so good. Like that's the thing. He's taken off on waves that can fully kill you, but he has the technical ability to make it not look easy, but like survive it and make most waves. Like, because you have to have a make rate up around near perfect, otherwise you're going home in a fucking body bag.
Yeah, and he will not pull back, but when he goes, he fucking that same Hobgood style, like grit and determination, and like just fucking going and making it most of the time. But then the same thing with his turns. Like, I've never seen more vicious surfing, I think, in my life, as like what he was doing. You know, him and Hazel going head to head. Hab was on his backhand, but Mikey was just like, it was crazy, because and Wade was like, yeah, that's Mikey. Like, he'll go home and cruise and whatever, and then he'll just go on a trip and it'll be 8 to 10 foot, and he'll just go out and absolutely demo the joint to pieces and then go home and cruise. And
it's very Reynolds-esque style surfing, just that unbridled aggression, going as hard as you can at a section, and knowing that you've got the ability to ride out of almost anything. Like, you're almost like conjuring up new lines and new ways to attack the section on the run, and just knowing that, like, if you end up backwards, like fucking going warp speed, you're going to be able to dig it out and keep going down the line. Like, that's what made Dane such a fucking spectacle to watch. I get the same feeling watching Mikey.
For sure. It's that same energy and that same just like the throttle is like beyond the fucking, you're like past redlining at that point. He's just like taking off and you're going a million miles and then turning so hard that most of the time the fucking board's like flying out from under your feet because he's like can't even fucking handle that much energy and speed as he's trying to put into stuff. But like 90% of the time he does, and he'll just do the biggest fucking turn you've ever seen, or air or whatever. And it was a crazy thing to witness. And then Noz wasn't able to come on that trip, but I'm just like sitting there going, what the fuck is going to happen when the three of these guys are like at that level all, you know, because once one person's doing it, the next one's just getting pushed. So I hope we're going to see through this project and the ritual kind of films and stuff, those guys like push each other to a whole another level, because they haven't had a platform to be able to like go on trips and do that together or whatever. So hopefully it kind of, you know, and then having Miller and Holly there, it's going to push those guys as well. And I feel like, I just hope that it just kind of this level we're going to see. And I'm excited to see what we get out of like the next year.
Dude, that is so exciting. That's amazing. It's so cool that you've now found your place. You like, you know, like Mike Tyson says, there's no growth without struggle. Like these kind of down periods in life are essential to get your bearings and make a new plan of attack. And that's where the growth happens, comes out of a place of pain a lot of the time. And you push through that adversity. And now you're in an amazing place, man, because you're able to mentor and add, you know, creative direction to like what is going to be one of the great projects in this modern chapter of surfing. I'm feeling like the way you're describing it and now thinking about the names attached to it, with guys who are at their absolute peak of performance, with up and coming talents like Mila and Holly, like fuck. It's a wild concept, and I can picture the kind of surfing you're talking about, and it really just means that like there's no way that this project can't succeed. Like if you have names that heavy attached to a project and to the films, like fuck, take my money, cunt.
yeah. And then Wade's talent behind the lens. I mean,
he's so good at what he does.
Repeater and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, and he's fucking just an absolute legend to.
He put that he edited Wasted Talent, that film you saw at the trade show the other night, did he? I thought his name was in there.
He put together so there was a little ritual like the title of the clip is Ritual Vision Brand Awareness and Marketing Video for the Surf Industry. is the title of the film that'll come out. It's not a film, it's just a clip, but that comes out at the end.
They're all old clips. I'd seen all those clips before. Yeah, it's not a real like.
It's kind of like just the first thing that we would have put out. That's like, here's the team all together, and how it gives. It was kind of like a it's almost just gives you a glimpse into kind of looking at those personalities and surfers all together, packaged together. It's like exciting to see them all like that, which was the first thing that kind of Wade and I were like, oh, how does it look when you just put them all together? And like, so that's kind of like a bit of a proof of concept-y, like, fuck, look at when you just chuck all these people in a melting pot. So yeah, it's a really epic group of fucking people. So I'm excited. I'm stoked I get to go on trips and fucking, I was on the beach with the Handycam in Puerto Rico, just like fuck, like got all these clips of me just losing my shit in the background while Mikey's just belting it. It was as fun as me sitting there watching it. It was the first trip I've done where I've been like, because I will still be surfing throughout the film and hopefully get some clips and stuff in it, but it's the first time I've been like, wow, it's not actually my priority on this trip to like have to go and surf and perform and blah blah blah, because as amazing as it is, it's like, it's fucking stressful to try and be at peak performance when someone's filming. You're on a trip, there's been money invested, like it's all on the line. It's all down to you to perform at that point. And if you fuck up, like you're kind of blowing it for everyone. The other surfers, the more everyone's ripping, the better the film's going to be. So you can put a lot of pressure on yourself on those trips, and I always did, and my success rate is super fucking low, and luckily I shoot a lot and have shot a lot, so I've been lucky enough to be able to get footage over time through, like, having access to people filming and stuff, you know, whereas there are surfers that can go out and get fucking clips every time there's waves, Chipper, Mikey, fucking Harry, but I would say I'm a surfer that takes a lot longer to get clips, so the stress is always a lot higher for me personally. I'm like, fuck, I've got to go out and land the craziest thing I've ever done, you know, because you're trying to reach this level that usually is beyond, your level. You're basically throwing fucking Hail Marys at the wall half the time these days with airs to try and do something like crazy. So to be on a trip and be like, I'm just going to surf when it's fun and I want to surf, and then I'm going to shoot the rest of the time and hang and get to watch and like enjoy it. And it was such a nice thing. And like, I feel like that probably the best surfing is going to come out of that. For me personally, when that pressure's kind of off and you go like, oh, the wind's come up into the left, so I'm going to paddle out, and fucking next minute you're getting crazy ramps or whatever. So yeah, it's been nice to, for the first time, to kind of be on both sides, or be able to like, yeah, be just a part of the trip, filming and watching.
Enjoy the process.
Yeah.
Crazy how profound that is. I mean,
Yeah.
the Buddhists are all about that. It's like the whole purpose of life is to enjoy the process. If you're not, you just fucking, what are you doing?
Yeah, running to some end goal and missing fucking everything along the way.
Totally. And mate, one thing to keep in mind too, you know, man, our physical strength, our performance peak, you know, like I think at 36 we like max out in terms of the amount of like muscle and strength. Like that's like our peak of like physical strength. So, and it's a graph that goes up quite steeply and tapers off very slowly. So like, you know, like our concept of when peak performance is pretty askew. It's not in your like early 20s, mid 20s. Yeah, like at that point your reflexes can sometimes be a bit sharper.
Yeah.
But realistically, like, you know, if your strategy and your psychology and maturity is vastly elevated compared to that period in your early 20s, I think that can start to compensate for any decline in reflexes, and your strength is actually vastly superior to what it was in your supposed peak in your early to mid 20s. So that's why you see like crazy performances. I think like someone like Slater has been onto this fact, whether he knows the data or not, I don't know, but like his sensation, the way he feels through his body has told him that, yeah, I can still do some of my best surfing. I'm pretty sure he's 540 air reverse or 720 or whatever in Portugal was when he was like fucking 41 or some shit.
Yeah, I was going to say he was in his 40s for sure. Absolutely crazy.
It's crazy. Twiggy's like crazy one at Jaws was like, fuck, I'm pretty sure he was 46. Like Pete Mel was in his 50s when he got that crazy one at Mavs, that paddle one. So like, mate, you got plenty of good years left, Dion.
Well, thankfully to fucking...
Just get the Rhino Chaser out and start sending it.
Oh, dude, I think my big wave days might be slowing down, to be honest, after that. Between shippies and a couple of other sessions, yeah, mostly during Dark Hollow, I was like, okay, I enjoyed this, but it's fucking so gnarly. And these guys are so good. I love just watching that shit.
You're good enough, though. Yeah. Oh, you know, like that's the psychological component that's rattling you, but your skill base is fully there.
Yeah, it's definitely the psychological element. Like, I think if I can get over that, I'll be maybe more inclined to go get dust off the Rhino Chaser next fucking Mavs swell. But, yeah, oh, fuck, I had something I was going to say. I can't remember now. No, I mean, like, going back to what you were saying about the age and everything, I'm just lucky that I got supported up until this point, and now, luckily, again, like, through sponsorship, you know, because... like you were saying, and like how I felt with Dark Hollow, I felt like I was still surfing as good as I'd ever surfed and done some of the stuff I'd never done. And even now, like, there's parts of my surfing I feel are stronger than they ever were. So it goes back to that kind of physical side of it. And obviously your knowledge base of like surf wisdom, whether it be wave reading or like boards or just like you're just getting more and more in tune with all that stuff. So you're becoming more surf intelligent in that way. But there's unfortunately so many guys that don't have that opportunity because their sponsors drop them when they get to like their late 20s or whatever, you know, and they probably haven't done their best surfing yet.
Mate, that's the crazy thing about it. And it's just literally the story that we're telling ourselves as a collective is like, oh, this is where peak performance happens, is in this age bracket. The science doesn't support that.
Yeah. And it doesn't, I can tell you from like someone in it, in that prime, it doesn't feel like that. Like if your body was starting to shut down and you were really like struggling, I would get it. But if you're still fit and healthy and you feel like your surfing's like not being hindered by injuries or something like that, I don't see any reason why you should be surfing worse at that point than you were 5 years prior.
Mate, and totally, like, these companies lose so much by sacking people at that age because they're just coming into their own in terms of knowing who they are and bringing all this extra value to the company through, you know, like their understanding of the industry, of like the various facets that make up a surf career. It's not just what you do on the wave. There's a lot that goes into the back end of it.
So much goes into it. And that's one thing that I really would like to hopefully be able to help with Groms and stuff, whether it's through the Ritual program or through Forma or whatever. It's like that knowledge base you have of, specifically for me, I guess, like young free surfers or kids that want to take that path, because it is a very hard path to navigate. And first and foremost, you do have to have a sponsor that's willing to let you do that. But then on top of that, like, how do I go and make a surf clip? Like, how do I work with a filmmaker or like pull together an editor or whatever? You know, there's so many different facets to it to learn. And the older you get, the more kind of wise you are in that stuff, where it's like you can go and pull together a team of people to put together like a film project or whatever, because you kind of know this, that, and the other. And yeah, so hopefully, you know, I feel like if we can somehow keep supporting like kids the way I was kind of supported growing up, specifically in that free surf side of surfing, I feel like that would be an amazing thing to kind of like put some focus and energy into, as well as like, how do we help that blossom?
Surf to your strengths. That's what I like about your clips, and you know, like, there's no shame in that. Just go to what you're good at, and try and level up in that realm. It's always just it's a treat to watch, you know, like a Jai Glindemann on a right point, yourself on some wedgy rampy left, like, fuck, I'll watch that shit all day. Mate, your Sponsor Me tape is also out, which people can check out on the Forma website, which is fucking a pisser. It's like such a good concept because it's just a full retrospective of your, like, a lot of your career. And yeah, mate, it's been one of the great eclectic bizarro kind of careers. You're like a fucking Ricky Rasmussen or you know, one of these kind of like underground fucking you know, eclectics that combine influences, have all these weird and wacky experiences, and you can see it all condensed into one 15-minute or however long film it is.
Yeah, that was actually such a cool trip for me personally to go back through and do that. The idea kind of came about initially when I was sponsorless and thinking of ways to kind of like literally like go and try and get a sponsor, and what do you show them at that point? And kind of for me, I was like, well, it's been a pretty long career. Like, maybe you go back and kind of dig up all the old stuff. And then I kind of started thinking about the young Sponsor Me tapes I made as a kid, and that was how I got sponsored originally, was like sending out VHSs. And so that kind of started back last year when I was going through that phase, and I kind of put it on the back burner. And in hindsight, I probably should have fucking done it then when I actually needed a sponsor. But then I kind of got working with Forma and talking. We were trying to come up with a concept for, like, you know, the clothing collection and kind of like welcoming to the team. So I kind of pitched them. I was like, hey, I had this idea to do this. I don't know if you guys would be into it, like a Sponsor Me tape. Maybe I could like do this kind of thing where I try and send it to Dane and blah, blah, blah. And then they were all into it. So spent the last kind of month setting it up on the back end from like, you know, just through social media or whatever, through Instagram, just kind of like creating this fake kind of like Sponsor Me tapes thing and trying to get sponsored. Just like had a lot of fun with it. But to put it together and putting it out today, actually, we just put it out this morning, you know, it was actually, that was a really big deal for me, this little Sponsor Me tape, because it was so crazy nostalgic, emotional, kind of going back through like 20 years of your life and looking at this stuff and being proud of like the surfing that you've done over the years, and that's something that you've cared about so much and put so much time and energy into. So to like actually put it all in one little spot, I was like, oh, this was really nice for me to go back and look at that through kind of eyes now, you know, as a older gentleman. Looking at stuff from when I was 18 years old, and yeah, it was wild.
Mate, it is wild. I didn't know you won a Quicksilver Air Show. Those things were mental when I was a grown. I
think I was 17 or 18. It was in Maroochydore, and it was during schoolies. I left schoolies. I was staying in an apartment on the Gold Coast at Surfers. Had to go up there for 2 days. Left, went up, somehow won the comp. Like, it was, the waves were fucked, but like, just was doing
Randy
like
Welch,
David Smith, probably Kersey, Kirk Flintoff,
Flintoff was so good in those things.
Yeah.
Frontside air reverse all day.
Goodall would have been in it.
True.
He was kind of like the young one with me. Dave Nelson, who was like the godfather of the air show series. You know, he kind of took us in and looked after us and was just like the biggest fucking legend ever.
Barney and...
It was mostly Australian dudes.
Oh, okay.
Caddo, James Caddo.
Yeah.
Yeah, just this iconic. That was a fucking another amazing time period of like those Quicksilver air shows, and like the culture and the people that were in those were such all unique individuals, and you'd go and it was just this big fun party and everyone would be there supporting each other. It wasn't this like real kind of competitive thing. But yeah, I was just a little grom. I think I was kind of probably people were off me because I was like doing little double grabs at the time, like probably little safety airs and stuff.
You reckon they were off you?
Don't know. I reckon maybe you'd have to talk to one of the older dogs, I reckon, because actually it was funny when I've been doing the sponsor me tape thing and putting these little things out, all these old crew that I grew up with and used to travel, they're coming out of the woodworks and kind of getting involved, and it's become this really funny interaction with like so many people online. But Luke Wienert commented on one when I had the thing, and he's like, I'm pretty sure you knocked me out in the semis in that one. And I was like, oh, fuck, sorry, man. He's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I quit surfing after that. I was like, no, Luke Wienert was like one of my favorite fucking surfers growing up. And and guys like him were just also like underground fucking air dudes. It was this crazy culmination.
It was so
dudes.
pumped, that scene.
Yeah.
Classic. I can remember going to an air show at Manly, Bruce Irons, Barney, Randy Welch, Craigie, Kirk Flintoff, yeah.
I wonder if that might have been, I feel like they did finals and like big ones where they brought in international dudes and stuff. Maybe they were doing the same tour in the US and then at the end put them together. But yeah, the ones that I was doing were mostly the Aussie dudes, but they were doing stuff in the States. That's kind of when Kersey was going over and then made a big name for himself over there in the US air shows with all those dudes. But yeah, won that one and went back to drove straight back to schoolies. And
your ability to just get like stacks of 10 grand and just go straight into an incinerator of hedonism is like fucking peerless.
All I need
Twice in your life that's happened.
I'm hoping it's coming up again soon. Fuck, I need another 10 grand for sure in a yellow envelope.
Who doesn't?
Head to New York. But yeah, no, that was a good fucking time. And yeah, putting that film together, the Sponsor Me tape, it was a weirdly special one for me. You know, it is just like a welcome to the team thing for Former and kind of like a capsule collection launch, but it kind of meant something a bit more for me to kind of look back at that stuff. And, you know, even last night when we were there and I'm watching it with like Miller and Lungi, I'm like, man, there's no way that they would know where 95% of any of this stuff was from or what it was or like had never seen it.
Yeah, they wouldn't have even been born when it was going down.
There's honestly clips in there they for sure weren't born.
100%.
Like I was 17, 18 on the Goldie surfing.
These kids were born in like the fucking 2000s, like late in the 2000s, weren't they? They're like, I don't know.
It was crazy. So that's kind of cool to be like, they were like, oh, Miller was like, fuck, that was sick. And I'm like, oh, that's cool to see like an up and coming like gnarly Grom be like stoked on like old clips that you had from way back or whatever. It's been, yeah, it was a fun thing to do.
Sick, mate. Well, fuck, it's been great having you on and love everything you've done, mate. It's been a hell of a journey and yeah, it's been good to share some of it with you.
Oh, mate, you've been there for a lot of it and I really thank you and your support over the years. Like you've always been there for me and in my corner, and yeah, you've done some amazing articles fucking that I cherish and have in magazines at home that are super special to me. So thank you, Smithy.
Magic, brother. Thank you.
Appreciate
Legendary.
it.